Alright, I've been meaning to get to these games for a while now, but I just couldn't find the time. But now since school is over, for me at least, I think I'll be able to manage. I just want to make clear that I won't be looking at these three games, not Jak X or Daxter, because I don't have Jak X at the time, and the emulator I used to play PSTP games isn't really working right now, so that's gonna have to wait for another day. And Lost Frontier is just... So yeah, anyway, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Jak and Daxter Marathon. Jak and Daxter is a 3D platform game released back in 2001. The people behind these beauties, Naughty Dog. For those who were born in the early to mid-90s, you probably remember Naughty Dog from the Crash Bandicoot trilogy on PS1. Those games are awesome, and I can't wait to see what game they have in store for next. Nowadays, Naughty Dog is known for amazing series like Uncharted and The Last of Us. Uncharted is a fantastic series with gorgeous backgrounds and great characters, while The Last of Us is Naughty Dog's attempt at a more serious and gritty story, which is why I love that game. Honestly, it's one of my top 5 favorite games of all time, and I can't wait to play a sequel. After making a great trilogy of games and even a pretty solid kart racer, Naughty Dog no longer owned the rights to Crash, so Sony's new console was coming out, and Naughty Dog came up with a new IP which development lasts for 23 years, and lo and behold, Jak and Daxter. You know, when you really think about it, this isn't really any different from Insomniac Games, Spyro the Dragon, and Ratchet and Clank. Anyway, when I was younger, I played the hell out of these games. I even collected all 101 power cells and all 2,000 Precursor orbs a dozen times. They were great 3D platformers back in the day, some better than others, but I digress. And what I really love about doing these reviews is looking back at the games that I used to love as a child and see if they hold up to my standards of today. Anyway, we start a story with Jak and Daxter on a speedboat to Misty Island. While they're there, a lurker comes out and attacks Jak and Daxter. Jak throws a bomb at him, causing Daxter to fall in a pit of dark eco. Daxter pops out as a Pokemon, an odd soul, and then they come back to Samos to figure out how to turn Daxter back, but because he has a white Santa Claus beard, he just turns into old and cranky. Kira, who at least can learn a lot from.
Rule number 1, I don't date animals.
You don't know what you're missing.
Tells them to collect power cells from the villagers in Sandover Village. This is where the story just kind of pauses. It can be summed up as collecting power cells and precursor orbs and going to another location. As we go on the volcanic crater, Golemaya reveal that they're going to make a giant robot to destroy the world. Jak and Daxter ain't having that shit, so they go to the Citadel, save all the sages, they weaken the robot, and the duo take them down. And it's really sad because Gull is the only one who can change Daxter back to his normal state.
I'm doomed.
By the way, if you collect all 100 precursor orbs, which really isn't that hard to do, you get a secret ending showing you what's inside of the secret precursor door.
It's so beautiful.
By the precursors.
The story is short, simple, and to the point. I honestly really enjoyed it, although I just wanted to say that making Jak a new protagonist in a character-driven 3D platformer doesn't really work here, because we all know that teenagers are one of the most quiet people on the planet. Even though the plot's a little bit shaky, the gameplay where the game truly shines. You assume control of Jak, and the name of the game is to jump, collect precursor orbs, collect power cells, and die. The game's kind of structured like Banjo-Kazooie. You're thrown to a level with little direction, you have a set number of things to collect, and you're rewarded for being curious. I really love this kind of level design. In fact, there's no loading screens to be seen in this game whatsoever, not even after dying. I think it's safe to say that this might be one of the, if not the first open world platformer. Jak 1 really did the best job at making the world feel interconnected. As soon as you enter a next level, there's no loading screens, you're just there. What I really love about this game is the sense of discovery. Like when you see a trail of precursor orbs, you're already at another level. The pace of the game isn't interrupted by any loading screens, which appears in literally any other game ever. Or in Forbidden Jungle, where you just walk inside of a tower and you're just in a whole new level. There's a similar feeling with the final boss too, and what's really cool is that sometimes what you do in one level affects everywhere else. Anyway, Jak himself is pretty versatile when it comes to combat. He can slide punch, which doubles as a slam attack and an uppercut, roll, do a long jump, and do his best Bandicoot impression. While Jak is capable of taking on 2 or 3 enemies, but any more than that, Jak's not very good. In ambush sections, every time Jak hits something, there's a timing window which leaves you vulnerable for a couple of seconds, and to add an insult to injury, every time Jak dies, Daxter likes to tear him down to come up with the quip with that oversized mouth of his.
I'll say something really teary at the funeral, like, "How am I gonna get change back now?"
But to remedy this problem, there are eco powers you can experiment with. The blue eco makes you run faster and open up Precursor ore vents and jump really high. The red eco makes your attacks faster. Yellow eco turns you into Super Saiyan, and green eco increases your health. Jak also has pretty good and precise movement. He doesn't feel too heavy while at the same time not feeling too light, and when I die, it feels like it was a mistake I made. I can't say I've been a victim to collecting patrols. Now let's get on to the main collectibles, Power Cells. Power Cells are your end goal objective. You can get one either by riding a Zoomer, collecting all 7 Scout Flies, completing a certain platforming challenge, and almost everyone in the town has one for absolute bullshit reasons. This guy has a Power Cell for his re-election campaign. This girl has one for scientific research. And that's where the Precursor orbs come in. Think of them like the musical notes from Banjo-Kazooie or the gems from Spyro. Moneybags, you greedy bastard. What I really like about going for some of these Precursor orbs is just exploring the environments. I mean, I just found these trail of Precursor orbs by complete accident. You can give these to people to help them with their problems. There's also these Oracle machines that give you 200 Precursor ores in exchange for 2 Power Cells. Anyway, you can ride a Zoomer, which can be fun at times, but it can be a little bit frustrating to handle. You can also ride a bird called a Flet-Flet. Why does that sound like a brand of cereal? Anyway, that's fun in every level that I've seen. You know, all 2 of them. All 9 levels, well 10 if you count all of my Citadel, are pretty fun all things considered. The bosses are honestly just pathetic. They're just way too easy and just lacking in 2 personality. The only boss that I liked was the final boss, but it's still way too easy. While the game is pretty fun, the game is a little bit too short and easy. If you're fast enough, you can beat this game in 6 hours, even if you collect all 100 Precursor orbs and Power Cells. But the short play kind of helps it in his favor. The game can get a little bit repetitive with just collect Power Cells here, we have some memories here, and go Super Saiyan here. For PS2 standards, these visuals look gorgeous. The level aesthetic has really nice textures and the draw distance looks so great. Although playing on a widescreen TV makes some things come out a little bit pixelated. But it's really easy to stop what you're doing to just look at the view. The character models, on the other hand, have not aged well, especially compared to later games in the series. Back in 2001, these may have looked great in its time, but some of the faces these characters make are just hilarious. Yes, Daxter, I'm looking at you.
What?
The soundtrack isn't really as memorable. I mean, it's not a bad soundtrack and it fits most of the levels, but I can't really remember a lot of them. I really like songs like Mountain Pass's theme, which is pretty good, and the nostalgia theme, which is Sandover Village. My favorite theme will have to be the final boss with Galamaya. It's well composed, so in conclusion, this is probably one of the greatest PS2 games of all time. While the game is pretty short and easy and has a couple of frustrating moments, Jak and Daxter doesn't really do anything wrong as a platformer. The worlds are bright and colorful, the platforming is precise, and it's all just all around a great game. The game even went on to sell 15 million copies, spanning 2 direct sequels and 2 spin-offs. What about Lost Frontier? I have no idea what you're talking about. It's nice to see that Naughty Dog managed to create a whole new world without making the first game so frustrating to 100% complete like Crash 1, and even got that Red Greatest Hits label, which I honestly don't get why people hate so much. Why does my copy of Jak 1 have the greatest hits label disc, but not the greatest hits label case? Why is same with green on the back? Oh guys, Jak and Daxter is a pretty funny game. It has aged remarkably well. I really recommend you guys pick this up and see what this game's all about. Now I want to know what you guys think. Jak and Daxter look like a good game to you? Have you played it? And what are your memories with this game? Let me know in the comments below. So now we have this game over there. Next time on the Jak and Daxter Marathon, we're going to be looking at Jak II. Hope you guys look forward to that. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see y'all next time. Peace. Hey guys, we're back to the Jak and Daxter Marathon. Last time we looked at the Jak and Daxter Precursor Legacy. I thought it was pretty good, even though it was short and easy, and you could power through it in 6 hours, even if it's your first time. There were some problems with it, but hey, what they got right, they did right. So now we're gonna be looking at the sequel, Jak II, also known as Jak II Renegade in Europe and Australia. First, there's Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy. It did well for Naughty Dog and it went to sell well. A sequel was bound to happen, but what were they gonna do? What could they add to the game to make it different enough to not dip in quality? Well, let's pop this game in and see. Now this game is drastically different compared to the last game, mostly in tone and gameplay. This game just added guns, missions, and driving. I've always found it kind of weird how Jak II got a PG rating in Europe but got a T rating in North America. Anyway, when I first played this game a few years back, I absolutely hated it. I just thought it was too hard and didn't like the guns, but that was years ago. Maybe my opinions have changed. And we'll start off with the story, but first, spoiler warning. If you haven't played this game yet and you want to, or you already know what's going on for a while now, please skip to this part of the video. I'll give you 5 seconds. If you collected all power cells in the last game, you get a small little cutscene that shows you a door glowing. In this game, it showed as a precursor lift, so Kira tinkers with it to set it up. Jak presses a button and...
Hey folks, viewer mail time again! Oh, here's one from Sally, age 14. Dear Pig, aren't you interrupting the story at the most suspenseful part? Well, the answer is yes, Sally. Yes, I am. Keep those cards and letters coming!
I want on this thing! Find yourself, Jak!
After that happens, the gang gets split up and Jak and Daxter arrive at a town named Haven City. Literally seconds after, people show up to take him away. Daxter craps himself and runs away to start his own PSP spin-off game, and Jak gets taken away. A whole 2 years have passed, and the Baron has been pumping a dark ego into Jak for all those years. After Daxter gets tired of having his own adventure, he comes back to Jak. Jak gets so excited, he says his first words.
I'm gonna kill Praxis!
What the heck was that? Sheesh! Remind me not to piss you off.
The two bust out of prison and meet a boy and a man named Core. After beating up the Crimson Guard with a K, Core tells Jak that there's an underground fighting against the Baron. For them to get into the underground, they need to steal the Baron's flag. This is kind of where the story just pauses. Anything from now to their first boss is just filler. Jak and Daxter find out that the Baron is meeting up with the Metalhead leader. He pays him an ego to keep the Metalheads out the city. Later on, we found out that Haven City is actually our world, but in the future. This kid, who is apparently the heir to the throne, has to go on some trials to prove himself worthy. He's too young, so Jak does it himself, and finds the Precursor Stone at the end of the trials, which is the best level of the game. But Praxis finds it before we do, and plans to break it open. The destruction has left the crew, who just died to an explosion. Jak and Daxter return to the city, only to find Metalheads are still there. It's revealed that Core is actually the Metalhead leader, so he destroys half the Baron's forces, and Jak and Daxter confront him for a final showdown. Before dying, he actually reveals that the boy is a young Jak, which honestly just raises so many questions. Anyway, instead of Jak, Daxter, and Samos going back to their own timeline, they send young Jak and young Samos, which makes a lot more sense if you play the game for yourself, back to the hut. Daxter now owns a bar, and they live the rest of their lives in Haven City. The story kind of drags and sometimes feel like it's going nowhere, but I honestly really enjoyed it. While Jak II adapts well to its dark tone, there's still a lot of humor to it and doesn't feel out of place. All the characters in this game are way more engaging than the pieces of wood in the last game. Samos and Kira return from the last game, but there's also Torn, who's the second command in the underground, Arrow, who just kinda shows up as Jak's rival in the racing sections of the game, but then offs himself off for losing the last race, Sig, who is a metal hunter slash wastelander, Tons of Fun Kuru, who gives us most of our gun upgrades, Ashlyn, the Baron's daughter, who has really nice facial tattoos, Tess, an even bigger advocate of bestiality than Princess Elise, Vin, the paranoid scientist, and Onan and Pecker, the wise woman that Pecker translates. Like I said, sometimes the story feels like it's going nowhere, but the cutscenes and the characters' interactions really make this world feel more alive than the first game, and they're just great to watch, especially with the graphical upgrade. The first game's gameplay style can be compared to Banjo-Kazooie's structure, Jak II, Grand Theft Auto. Okay, let's start off with what's more similar to the first game. Jak has his old moveset back. He can slide punch, long jump, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Because of the Baron's experiment, Jak can turn into an alter ego called Dark Jak. Dark Jak makes mincemeat out of enemies. You get stronger melee attacks, and he's just all around faster than regular Jak. I'm sure you notice whenever you kill a metalhead, some yellow orb pops out. These are called metalhead orbs. If you collect a certain amount of metalhead orbs, you can take them to the Oracle machine and it gives you powers to effectively use Dark Jak. like a punch explosion, a death tornado spin, and it also makes him invincible. It isn't until an hour in the game where you get your first gun. Adding gun gameplay to a series where the first game didn't have any? Where have I heard that from before? Okay, all jokes aside, the gun gameplay actually fits in better than you think it would. There are 4 guns that you can use. There's a scatter gun, which is pretty much the equivalent to a shotgun. Its range is pretty short, but it does deal with small enemies. The morph gun, which is the gun you can spin around to shoot multiple enemies, which we'll probably be using a lot. The Vulcan Fury, which fires faster but with low damage. And the Peacemaker, that shoots a lightning bolt that stings enemies at the same time. All the guns have their uses in the game, but you'll probably use the morph gun because A, has the best range, and B, you can shoot it multiple times. While you'll probably get used to the gun gameplay, this game is pretty hard, more towards the end of the game, but I will get to that later. Anyway, Jak controls the same as the last game, so pretty much flawless. The enemies are always ganging up on you, and there aren't a lot of invisibility frames, so don't be surprised if your health drops to 0 really fast. And to top it all off, Naughty Dog forgot what checkpoints are, so if you're made a lot of progress and you die either from enemy placement or mistimed jump, you have to start all the way from the beginning. And what's annoyingly inconsistent is that some missions have well-placed checkpoints, and some missions seem to have no checkpoints whatsoever. This is how the game's structured. You grab a car, you drive to a mission marker, listen to someone complain, and then you do that mission. There's also a lot of driving in this game, which I honestly don't know why this game gets so much shit for it. The only time I actually find it annoying is when you complete one mission and have to backtrack to the next marker on the map, only to hear that someone needs something to be done again. While I can agree that some of these cars control pretty poorly, except for the small ones, I don't really mind driving. While missions take up most of the focus, there's still a platform every once in a while. One of my favorite missions is when you solve this cube puzzle. You need to knock these cubes to make a bridge while also taking into account how many cubes are left. It really felt rewarding to finally figure out this pattern. There's also a lot of variety in between each mission. Sometimes you'll be riding a hoverboard, other times you'll be doing motor races, which I honestly don't really mind the first and second races, but it's the final race with Arrow that really grinds on me gears. I swear it's near impossible to make this shortcut without crashing, and on top of that, the other racers really love to grind into you so much. I thought I was playing Jak II, not Boating Bash. There's also turn sections which are mostly fine, but this one in particular really pisses me off. I swear the first section, the enemy designers decided to spam Crimson Guard everywhere. Sometimes you won't be able to see most of them because you'll be too busy taking on one of them, causing you to fucking die. The last 2 sections aren't really as bad because they focus on shooting at the blimps out the sky, and they didn't spam as much Crimson Guards as the last sections. At least there's checkpoints in between each section. If you die and had to complete the entire mission from the beginning, this mission would be fucking unplayable. While all of these missions are hard, it's kind of fun, kind of hard. When I finally complete this mission, I get a satisfactory feeling when I beat a hard mission. It's kind of like the satisfaction you get when you complete the perfect run from Mario Galaxy 2, or collect all the gems to get the hidden ending from Crash Bandicoot Trilogy. Throughout the first 3 acts, the game's challenge is pretty fair. Sure, there's an occasional massive difficulty spikes, but that pales. It weeps in comparison to all the bullshit I had to deal with in the final third. In fact, this part of the game is so hard, it made me want to do something I've always wanted to do, mainly because to save some editing. Rage mode. This section of the video is going to contain a lot of uncensored swearing, so if you don't like any of that, please skip to this part of the video, so don't say I didn't warn you. I swear, almost every single mission in this last third is just so painful. First is this escort mission with Sig. I mentioned how scarce checkpoints are in this game, but this is where it really starts to piss me off. You have to solve this puzzle and where you have to knock the cubes into a hole, except it blows up. In the last section where Sig gets ambushed, you have to get these cubes in the hole before you die, and at any point, you're sent back to the beginning. Next is this stupid ass boss with Crew. I swear it's impossible to kill these little blobs without getting hit yourself. And when Crew comes down to fight you, sometimes he even blindsides you. And when he blew up alongside with the tower, I said, "Yeah, eat it, bitch!" Then you have to escort these 3 dickheads who can't defend themselves for anything, but have no problem busting a cap on you if you accidentally hit one of them. And that one mission where you have to find the Heart of Mar, where the enemies are spammed left and right, it's especially annoying when you're on the edge of a platform and the Crimson Guard shoots you down, causing you to die. The final race with Arrow is the worst out of all of them. There's a stupid ass mech scene which is slow, it's sluggish, and it's not really suited to combat, which really defeats the purpose of a mech, don't you think, Naughty Dog? The mech is easily the worst part of the game, and one of the missions, they decided to put it underwater. What fucking asshat came up with that idea? Okay, I calmed down. Let's go back to being somewhat family friendly. Anyway, let's go on to the bosses. they are 10 times better than they were in the first game. Especially the one in the second half where you knock all these boulders back at the Baron. The final boss with Core is pretty hard, but it's still a pretty good boss battle. Precursor orbs make a return here too, but unlike the first game, they're spread out through the entire world. Hunting them in levels can be a complete chore to do because they're spread out in the most obscure places. A large portion of them can be found in Haven City challenges, like flying through rings or finding them based off an image. There are a total of 286 Precursor orbs in this game, and I really have a long way to go because when I beat the game, I only had 48 Precursor orbs. When you collect all 286 Precursor orbs, you unlock Hero Mode, a lot harder version of the game. All weapon models are unlocked from the start, but the makeup for it, all enemies are a lot harder to kill. So if you didn't thought the game was hard enough before, so try this then. To this day, I still have not tried out Hero Mode, but I have to be really bored to ever consider it. Maybe I'll stream myself doing it. I know you guys love to see me torture myself for your amusement. Graphically, this game looks great to this day. I mean, considering the fact that the first game was already bright and colorful, this game didn't really have to improve on much. Although playing on a widescreen TV does make things a little bit dark, but the game is pretty beautiful, all things considered. The character models have also gotten a great upgrade since the last game. I mean, for 2003, these character models look like they should be on a PS3 game. Daxter no longer looks constipated, Jak has more expressions just why am I with this guy, and even Kira and Samus got a nice upgrade. It's not really in the way of memorable music. I mean, it's not a bad soundtrack, but it's mostly ambience without a memorable beat or riff. I can't really remember any song to save my life, well, except the one we were flying in Haven City, and when Daxter is being chased by Boulder. Voice acting has also been improved since the last game. Mike Irwin does a great Jak, Max Casala is amazing with Daxter as always, and Clancy Brown is great as a Baron. Does anyone else wonder why Clancy Brown voice acting in Naughty Dog games? I've always dreaded the day I had to go back to this game. I've always just thought of Jak II as just an unfair, unpolished, and just an impossible game. While Founder 3rd does suck ass, Jak II is so far my favorite in the trilogy. Haven City feels more alive than the last game. New characters are way more engaged in the brick walls in the last game, and even though adding gun gameplay sounds like an awful idea on paper, it actually works well in the game's favor. Even with the unfair difficulty at times, I actually recommend this game. It mostly feels good conquering these really hard missions, but I don't really recommend going after all the Precursor orbs. Jak II was critically acclaimed when it first came out. IGN gave it a 9.5, Metacritic gave it a 87%, and GameSpot gave it a 9.1 out of 10. Naughty Dog no doubt has some massive shoes to fill, and with only 1 year later we got treated to the last game in the trilogy, Jak III. But that's for next time, so I'm going to do my best to try to play this game as fast as I can, so that I can get a review out by the end of July. So, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.
By order of the Grand Council of Haven City, for heinous acts and crimes against the people, you are hereby banished to the wasteland for life.
This is
Like that's ever gonna happen. What a load of...
Hey guys, welcome back to the Jak and Daxter Marathon. Last time we finished off with Jak II, and now we're about to finish the Jak and Daxter Marathon with Jak III. This game doesn't really have any original names, so yeah. Anyway, Jak and Daxter Precursor Legacy was just a pure platformer. The open world level design of the game, well, I mean, at least as open you get on the PS2, was really innovative for its time, and its type-precise platforming really makes it one of my favorite PS2 games. Jak II just went balls to the walls, added missions, cars, and weapons. Like I said in the last review, Jak II was critically acclaimed when they first came out. There was 9s and 10s flying everywhere. Naughty Dog knew that they had something going, so how could Jak III, one of the most hyped up sequels for its time, live up to its absurdly popular predecessor? I mean, the same thing could be said about how Jak II could live up to Precursor Legacy, but Jak II left some massive shoes to fill. Jak III was first revealed in February 2004 and was released in November of that year. When I first played the game, I was blown away by the graphics and gameplay. I also loved playing with the cards when I was younger. This game has been a lot of people's favorite Jak game, but does this game still hold up today? Well, as always, we'll start with the story. First, spoiler warning. If you know what's going on or you haven't played the game yet, please skip to this part of the video. I'll give you 5 seconds. Jak III starts off after the events of Jak II when Jak defeats Core the Metalhead leader, but the Metalheads find a new leader and KGB deathbots are spread left and right throughout the city, and the people start blaming you even though you saved their lives in the last game.
What an asshole!
Count Vigor banishes them into the wasteland to die out there. After losing consciousness, they wake up in a town named Spargus, a town where they take in people who are banished from Haven City. Damus, the king, says to earn his trust, they need to collect ancient artifacts and fight people in the arena. The story doesn't really make any progress while you're in the desert until the third act. That's just how it is in every Jak game, people. But it's the final part of the game where the story really starts to pick up. Anyway, it's revealed that Arrow is the main bad guy, the same Arrow who offed himself as the last race since Jak II, and he's the one sending all the KGB death bots. And we also find out that Dark Makers are actually precursors who have succumbed to Dark Ego and became evil. And the sun is also the Dark Maker's ship, and it's heading to Earth, and the only way to stop it is to go into the Earth's core to destroy the Dark Maker's ship inside. Damus comes to ride along with us, but seconds after...
Yo, holy shit, he dead!
Anyway, Damus dies, and also revealing the completely obvious bombshell that Jak is Mar, who is also Damus' son. I mean, it's never really explained if he's the Mar that made Haven City or his birth name is just Mar, but I mean, this would be a pretty touching moment if the game didn't make it so painfully obvious. Anyway, Vigor tells Jak that he's gonna become a precursor, and conveniently, there's two cars waiting for you, one for you and one for Vigor. Vigor finally gets to fulfill his wish to become a precursor, and it's also here we get to meet the precursors. Ooh, everyone's been asking what the precursor is for 3 games now, and now we get to finally see them. Oh, this is gonna be so cool.
We are unhappy with your performance. If you had been a true hero, you would have stopped Arrow by now.
Oh my god.
So apparently the precursors have been assholes this entire time, and also means that Daxter is a precursor too. Vigor finally gets his wish to become a precursor, which just means turning into an asshole. Jak is teleported to the Dark Maker's ship to destroy it from the inside. After doing so, Arrow, yeah, remember him, has the Dark Maker's ship set to a crash course on Earth. Jak eventually stops them, and Jak and Ashley share a kiss off screen. The precursors offer to show Jak the whole universe, only to jump out at the last second. Oh, and also, just to make everyone happy, Tessa's turned into an asshole, so her relationship with Daxter is only 15% less weird. Naughty Dog did a pretty good job in the story, and in my opinion, it's the best in the trilogy. While it doesn't really make any progress while you're in the wasteland, definitely picks up by the final third. While there aren't as many new characters as Jak II, they're all still pretty interesting. I honestly really love Vigor as a villain. I just love how he's so far possessed to realize what he's doing is wrong. It's kind of sad that he's just a side villain in favor of Arrow. He just wants to destroy things just for the sake of chaos. There's also this scene thing. I mean, I don't know what gender it is. I mean, Daxter calls it a monk boy, even though it's voiced by Tara Strong, so...
Heroes think they can save the world when they themselves are lost. You could not possibly understand the dark forces at work here.
Don't talk to me about dark powers. I want to know what this is. Stand back.
While some of the characters are pretty interesting, Jak himself is pretty flip-floppy when it comes to his motives. And at first he says he doesn't care about Haven City, even though seconds after the last cutscene, he's back in Haven City, almost enthusiastic about it. Then he says he has his own interest, even though said interests are never really explained. He also managed to ruin Kira too. In the last 2 games, she was just a love interest, and she was cast aside for this game for Ashlyn to be the main love interest. I mean, she only has like, what, 2 or 3 lines in the entire game? I mean, what the story lacks in characters, I think makes up for dialogue. I mean, the first 2 games had pretty good dialogue, but I think this game outbeats the first and second game. I mean, listen to this.
You are still here?
Yeah, we thought we'd hang out, catch some rays.
This isn't a game.
So yeah, there's not a lot in the way of character development, but I think Jak III did the best job, story-wise. Now let's get on to the gameplay. I mean, Did you like Jak II? I mean, I'm sorry to bring it up, but these two games are pretty much the same. I'll keep Jak's part simple. For the third time in a row, Jak has very fluid control. Okay, let's start off with what's different from the last game. First, this game introduces cars. It's already in the desert where you have a select number of buggies you can choose and drive, and they all have their own abilities, like shooting missiles, barrages. There's the one that does a huge jump when you release R1. All this does sound like a lot of fun. Driving in cars is one part of the game that has not aged well. All the buggies have really bad handling, and when there's rocks everywhere, it's really easy for you to spin out of control. And on top of that, there's also these assholes who are trying to kill you at any turn they get, and they don't really have any ulterior motives. Their sole purpose is to just make you miserable. They're really just a bunch of jackasses. Oh wait, I didn't mean to make a pun. Anyway, there's also new guns added too. They'll still use the Scattergun, the Vulcan Fury, Morph Gun, and the Peacemaker, but to get 2 new upgrades. Some of them are pretty useful, while some of them might be a little bit too overpowered for their own good, like the Beam Reflector. This is an upgrade for the Morph Gun, which bounces off of enemies. There's also the Plasmite RPG, which explodes anything in a 10-mile radius. The Mass Inverter slows down time and floats enemies everywhere. The Arc Wielder is basically a one-shot hit for enemies. You also get new Light Jack powers. There's the Flight powers, which helps you fly great distances, the Regeneration powers, which helps you gain your health back, and the Time Freeze powers, which can be useful, but are pretty situational. There's also the Shield power, which I honestly forgot was in the game. Light Jack is pretty useful in some sections. I usually use the Regeneration power when my health is really low. Dark Jak makes a return too. He has new powers like Invisibility, which is pretty useful, but is really underutilized. I just find it crazy that Sonic couldn't get invincibility powers right in 2006, 2 years after Jak III came out. Just make the character undetectable from the enemies, but have the outlines visible so the player can see. I mean, Sonic Heroes got that right, and that was back in 2003, so what the hell, Sonic Team? Anyway, Dark Jak can also do this Kamea Wave attack to break walls, which does come useful for some sections where they're needed. Apart from the final boss and sections where I needed to do it and when I pressed L1 by a complete accident, I never really used Dark Jak that much. He made mincemeat out of enemies in the last game because there weren't a lot of combat options. Here, almost every weapon gives the word OP a new meaning. Now there are way more variety in between missions, so many more than Jak II. Current sections make a return here, but if you ask me, done a lot worse in my personal opinion. And there are a lot of missions that stick out for better or for worse, and yeah, mostly for worse. Some part of me thinks that Jak III has an identity crisis. It's still running and gunning, but there's so many things happening. The Pac-Man section with Daxter can be really annoying. Trying to get these Marauders can be very frustrating, especially with the buggy, slippery-ass controls. There's even 2 on-road shooter sections, and when you get to it in Dark Maker's ship, it's the goddamn mech again. I mean, while these missions can be hard, Naughty Dog has learned from their mistakes. To start, Jak III has more of an adaptive difficulty system. Jak II was fucking hard, all things considered, so you died in a mission a number of times, the difficulty is toned down. It's also nice to see that Naughty Dog learned how not to be dickheads with checkpoints because there are way more checkpoints than there were in the last game. What's also a pretty funny callback to the first game, that Daxter calls to your face when you die adds more death quotes, although they only happen in specific areas.
This is what happens when they drop my name from the title.
Speaking of Daxter, he has a more prominent role this time around. He's usually used for climbing in certain platforming sections. I thought I'd just mention it. I know some of you would probably start crying if I didn't. The bosses are still good, but not as good as the last game in my opinion. They're all pretty good. My favorite would have to be the final boss. I think it takes advantage of all the skills you learned so far very well. Precursor orbs also make a return here too, and they're even more than they were before. There's now 600 Precursor orbs, and you're probably thinking, oh great, more Precursor orbs out to collect with no true reward. Wrong. Instead of getting a hard mode of what's already an infamously hard game, you get cool secrets like loot weapon upgrades, director's commentary, cheats and crazy stuff, and a hero mode. I was thinking about streaming that one day. The characters also share funny quips in the model viewer.
That's just all part of the package, baby. That's just who I am. I just gotta reach down inside and
I hope this game's fun. I mean, I do my part. I'm practically carrying the whole thing, you know. The next game should be called Orange Lightning Strikes Again. Orange Lightning Strikes Twice? You know, I think we should branch out. Shouldn't just feel completely anchored to the whole adventure genre, you know. I think we should be branching out. I got the moves.
I was like, oh my god, I got the part? For real? And I was like, dude, you won't be disappointed. I can like act and stuff. I even took a class. I mean, wow, to be an actress is like so cool. I couldn't wait to tell my therapist.
Well, the thing about Ashlyn is she got a great set of guns. The ones you shoot with. And, yeah, she's good. She's strong, she's intelligent. Yeah, fire in the hole.
Would I be willing to take off more clothes in the next game? Oh, honey, you couldn't handle me with less clothes.
If this game has anything over Jak II besides a better story, it's post-game completion. I honestly couldn't care about the Precursor orbs in the last game, but here, they actually reward you for collecting all the orbs. I actually want to collect all the Precursor orbs in this game. Jak III is a pretty good looking game for its time. The graphical presentation has been improved even further. Animations are so much fluid, and production values have gotten a huge overhaul. I honestly wouldn't believe this game came out in 2004. I mean, the character models are mostly the same from Jak II, except that Jak has gotten a new haircut for the third time in a row. But the game is pretty good looking, all things considered. Now, if the game looked like the commercials, that would be a whole nother story. I also love how you get to see the aftermath of what happens to Haven City. The tower has fallen on the left half of the city, and it's been used for a breeding area for metalheads. Jak III also has a pretty good OST. I mean, Jak 1 and 2 had a pretty good atmospheric soundtrack, but Jak 3 managed to make it even better. I can actually remember half of the songs in this game, and that's Jak 3, what people consider to be the best Jak game, the epic conclusion to the Jak and Daxter trilogy. I'm sorry, I just don't see it. It's a great game, it really is. Like, it's a step up in terms of post-game completion and story, but it feels like a step backwards in gameplay. There's not a lot of platforming in this game compared to the last two games. The missions that are thrown at me can be pretty good, while others are just downright bad. The car's handling are just horrible, and it feels like it has the turning physics of CTR, mixed with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's motion controls. It really saddens me to say it, but Jak 3 doesn't really hold up as well as the first two games. And it's not that I'm calling it bad, on the contrary, the graphics are pretty good for its time, and the story is subjectively the best out of the trilogy by the third act. Besides the much needed drop in difficulty and the more abundance of checkpoints, there really isn't anything different from this game and Jak II. This game will probably just be seen as the game that people want to play to finish up the trilogy. While I don't think that Jak 3 is on equal ground as Jak 1 or 2, it's still a pretty good game and I highly recommend it. Some sections can be annoying, but the platforming is still tight and precise as ever. And if you don't mind what they did to Kira or Jak being flip-floppy in terms of motive, you're gonna have a great time with Jak 3. And that's the Jak and Daxter trilogy, all wrapped up. Now, the moment of truth is that do these games still hold up as well as they do in the early 2000s? And I think the answer is already obvious. Absolutely. Replaying all these three games back to back, which is something I haven't done in a while, made me realize that the entire trilogy holds up in their own kind of way. Precursor Legacy is more accessible to the player and doesn't ask too much of you, therefore having a more relaxed experience and a game you can power through in a weekend. Jak II is for the more hardcore gamers that love getting kicked in the balls repeatedly, sometimes outright unfair, but still fun nonetheless. And Jak III keeps things from getting stale by including a variety of different missions. And yes, I know I spent half of the video bitching about some of these sections, but with a couple of exceptions, the action control really good and any or all deaths are usually your own fault. I mean, adding new gameplay styles aren't usually a good idea. I mean, look at 3D Sonic games. Some games usually tend to shove these kind of levels down your throat, like Raptor Cortex, but Jak 3's missions don't really feel shoehorned in. The PS3 and PS4 remasters are pretty good, and unless you're a stickler for playing the original trilogy on the original console, get the Jak and Daxter collection or bundle. It's been completely resized to a 1080p format, and it's been completely rendered into 60 frames per second. Now, if you had a PS2 and you weren't playing the Jak and Daxter trilogy, you may be familiar with a certain Lombax and a robot. Now, I know you guys probably want me to look at the Ratchet & Clank series, but this may come as a shock to you, but I never played a Ratchet & Clank game. If I ever decide to review the series, it's only if I decide to play the original trilogy for the first time. Anyway, from here on out, Jak and Daxter haven't really appeared in any other games during its lifespan. There's Daxter, a PSP spin-off game that takes place in the 2 years in between Jak II, and I was honestly surprised to see that this game has received really positive reviews. GameStop gave it a 9.1 out of 10, and IGN gave it a 9 out of 10, and so on and so forth. There's Jak X, a spin-off racing game that takes place after the events of Jak III. I won't say anything about any of these games because I never played any of them. Guess I should bring it up. There's also Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier, a game for the PS2 and PSP, which is often considered the worst Jak and Daxter game in existence. This game completely failed to meet standards by adding in none of the original characters except for Jak, Daxter, and Kira. None of them really act like themselves. Kira doesn't even look like herself, adding airship levels, making the villain boring as hell, and turning Daxter into—
Holy Jesus! What is that? What the fuck is that?
Besides that, Jak and Daxter also appeared in Sony Smash Bros. And Heroes on the Move, and that's pretty much it. Apparently, Naughty Dog was originally supposed to work on Lost Frontier, but they were working on a Uncharted series at the time, so they decided to hand it down to High Impact Games. Wasn't a very great idea, was it, Naughty Dog? They didn't want to work on Jak 4, but it was more grittier, more mature, hence cancel for straying away from the original concept. So right now, it looks like Jak and Daxter is finished, and it really saddens me because seeing franchises like Crash, Spyro, and Ratchet are still alive and well, but Jak and Daxter seems to be dead. You know, I honestly wouldn't mind seeing Activision reviving the series, or at least giving them the remake treatment like Crash or Spyro, but hey, a man can dream. Now, will I ever get to Jak X or Daxter? Of course. I mean, I've always wanted to play Daxter, but not now though. Before I end this video, I wanted to talk about the Jak and Daxter trilogy's regional difference from here and Japan, but really, there's not a lot to talk about. I mean, in Jak II, Jak's goatee was removed because it looked too aggressive. Unlike Crash Bandicoot, which was very popular in Japan, Jak I sold well, but because of Jak II's more grittier and dark tone, sales completely bombed in Japan, and Jak III was never released in there, and to my shock, neither were the spin-offs, except for Lost Frontier, but only on PSP. It wasn't until the PS4 remaster when Jak III was finally released in Japan. Well, looks like that's it for the Jak and Daxter trilogy. You know, it's weird. I was thinking I was gonna go into this trilogy, thinking I was gonna love Jak 1, hate Jak 2, and have mixed thoughts about Jak 3. That's almost been the opposite of what's happened, so it was worth replaying these games. But it has been fun while it lasted, but it's time to end the Jak and Daxter marathon. I want to thank you guys for watching, and next time we'll be reviewing The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. So I hope you guys look forward to that. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I'll see y'all next time. Peace. Hey everyone, how y'all doing? So last year I took a look at the Jak and Daxter trilogy and ended up having different opinions than I thought I would. I love Jak 1 as much as I did when I played it the first time, and I played it 5 more times to 100% completion too. I even streamed it back in August of last year. While I hated Jak 2 when I played it for the first time, and I still don't enjoy the final third of the game, I eventually came around to it and started loving the game to the point of me actually loving it more than the first game. Do I think it's as replayable as the first game? No, but do I think it's still a fun game overall? Definitely. Well, unfortunately though, the opposite happened to Jak 3 for me. I used to love Jak 3, but now I still think it's a good game, but I don't like it as much as Jak 1 or 2. In my opinion, kind of focused too much on fitting other genres into this game instead of the regular platform the series is known for. But hey, the changes happen for so frequently that I never really get bored from it. Now at the end of my Jak 3 review, I said I was going to review the rest of the series at some point, and since it's getting close to the 20th anniversary of the first game as I'm writing the script, I think it's the perfect time to get back into Jak and Daxter series, but we only have 3 games left to review, so let's continue with Jak X. Now when I first started the Jak and Daxter marathon, I was originally going to review Jak X that year, but since I couldn't find any copies of that game at the time, and I only had the original trilogy, I just said I would just review Jak X, and along with the rest of the games of the series another time, maybe around the 20th anniversary. And thankfully for my convenience, there's actually an event called Jak Month going around Twitter where people make Jak related content and all types of fan art. As I'm writing the script, the event is almost over in about a week. If you haven't seen anything about it yet, I highly recommend that you check it out. There's a lot of great content creators like PowerSoul Zeke and a lot of talented artists making the great stuff. Anyway, the only kind of exposure I had to Jak X were from reviews like Ant Dude, Remy Raccoon, and recently Square Eye Jak, and all of them had pretty opposing opinions. Frandu, he doesn't really like the game that much. He thinks the game has a good story, but the gameplay is just too hard for him to the point of him actually rage quitting. And for the others, they actually love the game, and that kind of worries me about how I might feel about the game, since the reception I've heard is kind of mixed, meaning that I would either love the game or hate it. But I finally got the game in mid-November, and I had pretty positive first impressions, but let's not get into too much detail about that just yet. We still have a story to talk about, and like always, there's going to be a spoiler alert. So if you're just here for my experiences, then just skip to this part of the video. I'll give you 5 seconds. Taking place after Errol's defeat in Jak III, Jak and the gang are invited to the reading of Crew's last will from his daughter, and somehow this thing managed to give birth to that. I would start asking questions about how that's even possible, but honestly that would just kind of get disgusting. So anyway, the gang takes a sip of the wine and then they read Crew's will, only to find out that Crew poisoned the wine, which everyone, including Rain, drank. So now they need to enter the competition called Combat Racing to get the antidote for the poison that they drank. They're constantly told by the showrunner JT Bliss that they're constantly being filmed on national TV and that everyone's watching. So from here on out, the story just kind of pauses. Any cutscene from now and up to the final cup aren't really story related. The only thing that really matters is that throughout the game, Jak and his crew are continually harassed by someone named Mizo who made a bet with Crew and who was doing anything in his power to stop Jak from winning races. After winning the championship, Jak and friends finally win the antidote, but JT comes in angry and proceeds to take away the antidote from Rain, and it's revealed that he's Mizo. Mizo drives away with the antidote, with Jak going after him. After a quick drive-by, Mizo crashes into a fiery explosion.
You have a habit of leaving people to die, don't you? You get used to it.
The gang starts celebrating that they're finally cured. And Rain gives them a farewell by leaving a figment of Crew's video diary, which Daxter activates by accident, presenting a hologram of Crew telling Rain how to pour the wine and to avoid being poisoned, and outlining his plan for his family to become the top crime family in the region, revealing that she was just like her father the whole time, and then calls up her associates for a meeting in a story that will never see the light of day because of how Naughty Dog practically left Jak and Daxter die, but at least Jak and Kira finally kiss without Daxter interrupting this time. So I know it felt like I was skimming over a lot of story during this summary, but that mostly has to do with the fact that this game's story doesn't really have a lot going on between the first act and the third act. While I do think the setup is pretty interesting, the story as a whole leaves a lot to be desired. So first, let's talk about how Mizo's built up throughout the game. Now they did something similar like this in Jak II with revealing Core as the Metalhead leader. How they did in that game that it gave out subtle hints about him might not being up to no good. The hints in this game feel more obvious before, with JT Bliss giving not so subtle facial expressions to Jak whenever he dismisses anything about Mizo. By the halfway point, I could tell that JT Bliss was already Mizo, because the gestures that he makes when he brings up Mizo's name weren't hidden that well at all. And then there's the fact how Razor, who's Jak's rival throughout the races, keep harassing the crew about how they're hiring new challengers, but outside of the robot that comes later in Cleaver, it's basically the same people you race over and over again. Some of the racers are even on your own team. This isn't something to really fault the story on, but it just shows that the need is some more enemy racers. But there is some things that I think that this game's story does better than the original trilogy. For example, they finally fixed their mistake and gave Kira more of an arc this time. In Jak III, she was kind of sidelined for Ashlyn to be the main love interest, and in doing so, she was reduced to being a background character with 2 to 3 lines. Now she's back to being herself. There's also a conflict between Kira and Samuel, where Kira wants to participate in the racers, but Samuel doesn't want her to because he doesn't want to see her get hurt.
But Daddy, I can do it! I can race better than any of those guys, you know I can!
Yes, I mean no, you can't. Well, I mean, yes you can, but that's not the point. I won't have it. A woman's place is in the garage fixing cars.
Did I just hear someone use a microaggression?
But during the last race, Kira races anyway, and after seeing her do so, Samuel congratulates her on racing. That was a good arc. Other than that, this game's cutscenes can be pretty funny at times, and can actually get a laugh out of me. Daxter is basically himself for the majority of the game. The interactions with Jak and the rest of the gang are pretty nice to listen to, since the voice actors are pretty great for their line delivery. And honestly, my favorite parts of this game are whenever JT Bliss and Pecker are always competing for the spotlight with each other. There's even one scene where Pecker just straight up flips off to JT.
Oh yeah, you just got schooled.
Birds do not school. They flock. So flock off!
Don't let your kids watch it!
So while the story's pretty weak, the gameplay more than makes up for it. So let's just get down to the basics. This game is basically just a more violent version of CTR. This game is pretty much like that, but instead of racing, there's more of a focus on combat, hence the name, Combat Racing. Racing is still a main priority, but the name of the game is destroy other racers in a fiery explosion. This game's fast, frantic, and probably one of the hardest races I've ever played. So since Naughty Dog already had made the Crash Team Racing before, making this game, and had vehicles established in the earlier games, specifically in Jak III, they basically had to make a game based on that entire concept, and I'm gonna be honest, I was a little bit scared of how racing might feel in this game. If you see my Jak III review, then you know that I can't stand the driving in that game. All the buggies controlled like ass, and there's one part of the game that hasn't really aged out that well in my opinion. Which kind of makes it worse since they're a huge part of the game. Here, I'm happy to say that I came out pleasantly surprised. The cars in this game control so much better than they do in Jak 3. They're not as slippery as they used to be, and whenever I crash into something, it feels like a mistake I made and not something that was completely out of my control. Not to say that you'll always have that feeling, but more on that later. The game's driving mechanics are pretty simple. On the bottom left and right corners, you see 2 meters. On the left is your health meter, which determines how many hits your car can take before combusting into flames. You can also hold on to your defensive items to block anything that's homing in onto you or blow up anyone from behind. On the right is your speed gauge. It shows you how much boost you can use before it drains. Doing power slides are a great way to keep getting more turbo boost to keep the speed going, but don't use up all your speed too early or else you won't have enough to boost through the final lap. And if you boost at any chance you get, you collide to every single wall you see. This is also where you hold your offensive items to destroy other racers in front of you. If you get a high number of kills, you go into a dark ego state where your item's stronger and you don't take as much damage from the other racers. I know it sounds complicated in explanation, but when you play the game for yourself, all this will click. And what will help that the game has a pretty good tutorial that shows you all the mechanics that the game has to offer. It's one of those games where it's easy to learn but hard to master. And yeah, it took me at least maybe 4 or 5 races to finally get power sliding down, but once I did, it felt so good at making sharp turns in this game. Honestly, I honestly think that is better than CTR in that aspect, because there's something about pulling off the perfect turn in this game compared to CTR. It might have something to do with the fact that the vehicle physics in this game are a little bit more heavier than they were in CTR. Although while some cars feel pretty good to control, others just control like complete garbage. I'm not sure if this was just me, but cars that control perfectly fine in one track are slightly more slippery than those stairs that Peter fell off of. They're completely uncontrollable. A part of me feels that Naughty Dog did this on purpose to emphasize on experimentation on other cars and make you try not to use the same car for every race, which is fine. Like, I'm all for experimentation, but this wasn't the way to do it. My vehicle going from having good handling to feeling like it's on ice, not only does it make sense, but it's also pretty damn annoying. But let's talk about the track design in this game. So unlike a game like Mario Kart, the vehicles are a bit more heavier and not as quick to turn, but the track design definitely accommodates for that, so there's no sharp turns, and they're mostly just straightforward and linear. They also have shortcuts you can take every once in a while, but they involve more looking around like in CTR. I haven't found too many shortcuts in this game yet, but if it's like anything like CTR, I'm sure I'm going to know these tracks like the back of my hand in 2 years' time. They also encourage you to power slide a lot for speed, but the city in Sewer Mass suck though. The city, because you're full of these tight turns, which like I said before, doesn't go along with Jak X driving physics. The sewer mostly has the same problems as the city, except for the fact that there's also some parts of the map where you have to make these jumps, which you can't influence in midair, so the moment your ass is in the air, you're either juking left or right or colliding face first into a wall. But that's only it. The tracks are honestly well designed, and while the game can get a little bit unfair sometimes, it still feels like you're in control of everything. So I'm sure you've all noticed these capsules that are placed around the track every once in a while. Like any other car racer, you get items to screw the other players over. These are basically just eco power-ups from Jak 1, but if it was a racing game. The blue ego increases your speed, the red ego gives you defensive items, the yellow ego gives you offense items, and the green ego will help you regain your health. There's a little bit of a risk-reward system with these items. You can either use all your missiles at once, or you can use one now, save the other 2 later. Same thing can be done for the defensive items. You can use them to blow up anyone behind you now, or you can use them to block any incoming items. Recommend the latter because the AI in this game doesn't fuck around. It isn't that bad in the early parts of the game. During the later half, it's honestly crazy how many times these guys can decimate me in one race. But you have the power to do that too, so the game definitely feels more balanced with that in mind. There's still that one blue shell item that can fuck up any flow you had, and sometimes you can get blown up in the moment you're about to finish a line, and that can sometimes make you rage quit, but even then, you can still block it with a shield item. The element of randomness is still there, but you can fight back. I don't get that feeling in Mario Kart, and not even in CTR. I think I've gone enough without mentioning how this game's story mode works. So you have about 4 that have 4 or 5 specific challenges. You earn the medals for completing these challenges with a certain score or beating them in 1st, 2nd, or 3rd place. Once you earn enough medals, you enter a Grand Prix qualifier where you have to earn a gold medal in order to be qualified for the final race. After that's done, you enter the next cup and you repeat. That might sound repetitive on paper, but there's a lot of stuff to do, so you don't feel like you're doing the same thing over and over again. It also helps that this game is pretty short. It can take about 6 to 7, maybe 10 hours if you completely suck at the game, so that helps from keeping the game from feeling repetitive. All the modes in this game are traditional races, the time trials, creature hunting, capture the flag, road rash, death races, atom races, and turbo boosting. Since I already covered the main races, let's talk about the other modes. Time trials are basically like the ones from Crashing Racing. You collect these time tokens that freeze the time for faster result. At least trying to get first place in these challenges isn't as much as a flick in the nuts and trying to get a platinum relic in CTR. Creature hunting is pretty much exactly what it sounds. You find creatures, you shoot them, gain points for doing so. If you get 10 points or at least more than your opponents, you get first place. If your item pickup, try to get all these precursor artifacts. Again, if you get 10 or have more than everyone else before the time runs out, you win. In Road Rash, you drive into as many cars as possible for points. It sounds fun in concept, and it really isn't too bad later on in the game, but your car can sometimes spin out of control if you run into a lot of vehicles in one path. Then there's death races. These are personally my least favorite challenges of the game. Here you shoot as many cars as you can. It's really just Road Rash with weapons. It's not a bad mode, but it gets repetitive after a while. Every time I gotta play these missions, I'm like, oh god, now I gotta play this again. Next is Capture the Flag. It's a pretty basic mode, but instead of a flag, it's a power cell, and you bring it to your base. Finally, there's the turbo boosting minigame, which is personally my favorite. You grab a power cell and you boost until you get to 100%. Then you get a defensive item to block anything behind you while that power cell is being utilized as your offensive item. It's not a very complex mode, but it's pretty fun to play through in my opinion. After completing these challenges, you earn Precursor orbs. You can use these to upgrade your stats to your vehicle and also concept art. You can also customize your vehicle to anything you want by changing the colors or changing its appearance as a whole, from its doors to its wheels. Overall, this game's customization is pretty solid. So outside the main story mode, there's also exhibition mode where you get to play with any cars you want and have free control on what characters you play as. It's a pretty basic mode for a kart racer like this. You can still play all the extra modes from adventure mode to here. You and a friend, or in my case a brother, can play with each other in versus races. This is also the first Jak game that has multiplayer options. You can change the setting like limited eco power-ups or changing the score limits. So since I got most of the gameplay out of the way, let's talk about the cool shit this game has. If you have a save file of Jak 1, 2, and 3, you can play as the version of Jak from those games. And if you have a save file of Ratchet and Clank, you can play as Ratchet but not Clank. But maybe that's just asking too much. It's a good thing that I did that Ratchet and Clank marathon when I did though. You can connect your PSP and get all the characters from Daxter in this game, which I don't have. But if you have a 100% complete save file for Daxter, you can unlock the Daxter Mobile, which is the best part of the game. You can also race as Daxter and Pecker if you play the game for 5 hours. And just like the Jak games from the past, you can unlock a hero mode, but this time you have to unlock it from complete the main game to full completion. So if you're a completionist, then that's more hours you'll get out of this game. I suppose spent the most time explaining the gameplay for this game more than any other game in the series. But anyway, let's talk about the graphics. Just like the games that preceded it, the game was really pretty. Although some tracks can look pretty dark at times, that's mostly have to do with the fact that I was playing the PS2 version of this game on an HD TV. But other than that, everything looks pretty good. The character models are on par with the original trilogy. The UI is pretty smooth and clean, and the backgrounds are pretty busy. Even with the little details like whenever Jak is power sliding or boosting, Daxter's holding on for dear life. I really love stuff like that. But the cutscenes are pre-rendered, so it doesn't really look as good as Jak 2 and 3's cutscenes. I'm just gonna go off real quick. What did they do to Torn's outfit? He had one of the coolest fits in the last 2 games, and now they just gave him this generic looking white shirt, as an Australian YouTuber once said. And I just need to point this out real quick, and I know I'm going to sound like a pervert for this. Blame Super Butter Buns, not me. She pointed it out, and now I can't get it out of my head. But how come Ashlyn's titties start pouncing all over the place from the tiniest movements, yet Rain's don't move a single inch? This game's jiggle physics are really inconsistent. Other than that, I have nothing else to say. This game's graphics are pretty impressive for a late PS2 hardware. And this game's soundtrack is actually one of the most memorable things about the game. Past Jak games, OSTs were alright at best, but they mostly were ambient without any kind of beat to speak of. In my Jak 3 review, I did say that the game had a more memorable ambient soundtrack, but this is the first time a Jak game has some kind of music to write home about. The composers of this game did an amazing job on this game's soundtrack, and the song of this game is something that I can never really get tired of. Although I feel like the soundtrack might be a preference thing, so people who aren't into rock music might definitely hate this soundtrack. I mean, I love it, but I have a bias to the electric guitar, so of course I would say that. The voice actors actually do a pretty good job too. Even love how during races, your opponents will taunt you whenever they blow you up. Booyah! And they'll even give you tips during the navigation screens.
This is the Red Cup Grand Prix. In this challenge, you'll have to compete in 3 events in a row and finish with the highest total score to win it all. Don't panic if you fall behind in the earlier rounds. It's the final score that counts. Look out for UR86 on the track. He'll be your toughest competition today.
And also, when I was doing research for this game, I actually found out that Tara Strong actually voices Kira in this game and Jak III. Yeah, Raven from Teen Titans.
Okay, why did the aardvark cross the road?
To beat up the idiot telling jokes about him.
The cast does a great job here, and overall audio presentation is great stuff. So I'll be honest, I was kind of scared that this game would be just like Jak III's cars for the entire game, and admittedly 1 or 2 cars felt that way. But honestly, I didn't think I would have as much fun with this game as I thought I would. I honestly think I might like this just as much as Jak 1 and 2. The gameplay mechanics are pretty well developed, the track design is top tier stuff, and the soundtrack is actually really memorable this time. The gameplay that was established in CTR feels so much better here, but with the heavier car physics and the risk reward system with items and boosting. So all that being said, I actually recommend you getting this game to only see how well Naughty Dog would do for their second kart racer. Although the game can be very hard, so as long as you have some kind of patience, then go for it. You could get it on the PlayStation Store for PS5 along with the rest of the trilogy, which by the time I ran this video was going on sale for $20. But it's not really a remaster of the game, it's just an upscale port than anything, which for some reason doesn't have online support, which is weird because the original PS2 release from 2005 has online support. But yeah, Jak X is a fun game. I think I might like it even better than Crash Team Racing. At this point of the series' life, Jak and Daxter as a franchise sold 12 million copies and would be seen as one of the main mascots for the PlayStation 2, next to Ratchet and Clank. But like I said before, this was the last JD developed by Naughty Dog, and since they felt like moving on to other franchises like Uncharted and The Last of Us, Jak 4 was in development and continued the storyline from the original series, but it was scrapped in favor for The Last of Us since it was too realistic for this series. So while Naughty Dog decided to take a break from Jak and Daxter for the time being, they decided to let other developers take over for a spin-off game. So next time we meet, we're going to be looking at the first game that was developed without Naughty Dog's involvement, Daxter for the PSP. I don't know how long this will take me to get this video out, but I promise I won't have you waiting too long. And also, I really want to thank you guys for being really patient while I wasn't really uploading any videos, and also want to apologize for not uploading for so long. I'm trying to get a new computer for that span of time, so now you know why. So anyway, with all that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace. By 2005, Jak and Daxter was very popular, well in North America at least. In Japan, the first game sold like crazy, but the series went downhill after the second game because, well...
Wait, I've seen you before. You're with the Underground.
Shh! I'm Tess. Torn sent me to spy on Crew. Play along, and I may be able to get my hands on a few of Crew's secrets.
So then with the 7 generations of consoles coming around, Naughty Dog decided to start a new IP called Uncharted, and after that trilogy was done, Jak 4 was in development, but it was then cancelled after it was decided to stray far away from the original formula too much, and it was scrapped in favor for The Last of Us, and people were still hoping for a new Jak and Daxter game, but Naughty Dog then announced that they didn't want to do any more cartoony platformers anymore, so that idea was thrown out the window, and leaving Jak and Daxter to be one of those franchises who were unfortunate enough to fall under the PlayStation curse. So while Jak X was the last game to be developed by Naughty Dog, it wasn't the last game in the series. So in E3 2003, Sony announced that they were working on their first portable console, then a year later they unveiled their console, the PlayStation Portable, aka the PSP. It was supposed to be their answer to Nintendo's DS. All stories showed the PS flopped in sales. It mostly had to do with the fact that Nintendo was pretty much dominating the handheld business during this era, with the DS selling over 150 million copies worldwide, while Sony's PSP... So yeah, Sony wasn't doing too well in the handheld market, which honestly kind of sucks because there were some pretty good games on the PSP, like Mega Man Powered Up and God of War Ghosts of Sparta. However, the one game that seems to be remembered fondly about the PSP is Daxter. I have only heard praise for Daxter and hardly anything negative. It will get the greatest hits label for the PSP, so yeah, I think it's safe to say that this is probably one of the only PSP games people remember. It's also a perfect time to bring up the fact that since Naughty Dog was working on Uncharted at the time, they decided to hire a new developer to work on this game, Ready at Dawn, and apparently this was their first game too. Before this game, I didn't really have any prior knowledge of their previous games, but after doing a little bit of research, I found out they worked on Okami, which I haven't played yet, but it's always been on my backlog. Their most recent games is the Echo series, which has pretty positive reception from what I'm seeing. So they seem like a pretty quality developer, and it seems like Daxter didn't take too long to develop either, since this game came out not even 6 months after Jak X. I've always thought it was kind of crazy how some developers can make really quality games in a short amount of time. I'm always thinking about how they get around the stuff that works and the stuff that doesn't work so quickly. But maybe I'm taking too deep into this. I think it's also important to mention that I'm emulating this on the PSP emulators, so there might be a little lag from here and there. Yeah, also this is the second time that I'm recording footage for this game, because the footage didn't render in 60 FPS, so now we're recording it again. and also the audio might sound a little bit muffled, so yeah. I'm sorry, but I really don't feel like playing this game a third time. But with that out the way, we have a story to analyze, so here's your spoiler warning. If you haven't played this game yet, then skip to this time frame. You have 5 seconds. So the game opens up with when Jak and Daxter pop into Haven City and they're approached by Arrow and the Crimson Guard. Daxter then runs away, promising Jak will come back for him. Like I said in my Jak III review, this game's story takes place in between the 2 years that's gone by in Jak II, between Jak getting taken by Arrow to Daxter rescuing him. So off the bat, that sounds pretty interesting, playing the game where it's the time skip from Jak II. It would be pretty cool to see how Daxter would be struggling to survive in Haven City all by himself, then seeing how happy he would be when he sees Jak. So instead of just showing us what's been happening for the past 2 years, the game just says lol, no, and just throws up until 2 weeks before Daxter rescues Jak. This was really stupid writing on the writer's end, but how good did I when I'm finished talking about the story? So almost 2 years later, Daxter is seen telling lies about how he took on metal-headed creatures in a bar. An old man named Osmo comes up to him and gives him a proposition for bug extermination, which he turns down at first, but then he does it anyway because... plot? So anyway, from here on out, the game is basically just go to this place and then kill all these bugs, and you're just doing that for 5 to 6 hours. But then Daxter remembers that he has a friend and goes to rescue him, only to go back to exterminating. Daxter also meets up with some new faces to help him out, but they're all pretty uninteresting and unmemorable. One of the biggest problems I have with the story is the lack of characterization. To be honest, that was kind of a problem in Jak X, but I think it might be even worse here. You meet up with Tarn, who is basically just Ashlyn but with blue hair. She doesn't really contribute anything other than giving Daxter his weapons throughout the game. Then there's Osmo's son, Simon, fuck his name's Simon. Simon's pretty much every single surfer dude stereotype you see. He just says bro and dude a lot. No, seriously, take a shot every time they say dude in this game.
Hello, furry dude. Get in. Thanks, dude. Welcome, dude. Dude.
How long is this gonna go on?
You drive you to places you need to be at, but that's pretty much it. Then we have the game's main villain, Caden. Compared to the villains from past games, this guy is pretty boring. He's just someone who wants to get Osmo's business shut down because plot, and also since Osmo is only in like, what, 25% of the game, this doesn't really make me go, that bastard. It just makes me feel apathetic to the thing as a whole. And also Daxter meets his bug and names it Tick after looking at his genitalia without asking, and then suddenly his sidekick Nell. But then literally like an hour without interaction with him, Caden comes and kills Tick, and it's supposed to be an emotional scene, and now Daxter wants to kill him. You can see where I'm getting at with this, right? So anyway, after Daxter finds out about a delivery to the Baron's palace, he then goes there and with a disguise, and after a really drawn out cutscene with Daxter and Errol, he finally enters the palace to find Jak. After overhearing a conversation with Errol and Count Beer from Jak III about Darpico, Daxter finds out about where they're holding Jak. He then goes to the prison that Jak is in, which is the best level in the game, and meets up with Caden, who transforms into a giant monster. Then Daxter goes after him. In a very challenging but well-designed boss fight, Daxter defeats Caden and goes up to where Jak is being held and kicking off the events of Jak II. The game ends with Daxter telling the story of this game. Okay, so I know it's only a portable game and I can't be too harsh on it for that, but I can't really help but point out that the story from a presentation standpoint is a complete mess. The game acts like it's a missing piece to the Jak and Daxter canon that fills in all the loose ends from their trilogy, but instead leaves a lot of unanswered questions that shouldn't need to be asked in the first place. Like, how come Osmo sees Daxter running away in the beginning of the game, but then doesn't approach him for another 2 years? That's like if Crash found out that Cortex was trying to kill his friends, then he waited a whole 2 years just before he could rescue them. And also the fact that they didn't show what Daxter was up to during the 2-year time gap. Instead of just dumps him before Jak was saved. This was a huge missed opportunity. They couldn't really show off how hopeless and lonely Daxter was in the city. There could have been so much more, but they just said, we can't bother to think of anything interested, and just started before Daxter got Jak back. Just the fact that we're not shown anything between those 2 years is my biggest issue with the story, leaving me a huge fan of the series, feeling underwhelmed. And also, the game just kinda ends abruptly too. I can't really explain it, something just feels like it was missing from this ending. And also, once the credits are done rolling, you're just booted back to Osmo's place like if the game just resetted. I know so you can play the rest of the dream level but you missed, but it just feels weird. But again, this is a game on the PSP, so I'm not going to expect platinum writing from here. But anyway, let's get on to the gameplay. So in this game, you take control of Daxter, and the name of the game is to kill bugs, then go to the next area, then kill more bugs, repeat, and then die. Daxter's moveset isn't very complex. He can jump, crawl, and use a bug zapper for combat. In one of the first cutscenes, Osmo equips Daxter with a bug zapper so he can do melee combat, and early on he gets a bug spray that's used as a ranged weapon and is used for platforming too. The controls are pretty solid. S is to jump and double jump, square is to do melee attacks, circle is to use a spray bug, and triangle is to crouch. Since the PSP only has one analog stick, the camera is mapped to the L and R triggers. Combat in this game isn't really as in-depth as in Jak II. With the bug zapper, you can do a 4-hit combo, with the final hit being a slam attack that splats bugs. You can also do it a second or third time to kill a bug behind you. You can also spray the bugs too. There's different versions of the bug spray. The green one is basically the normal bug spray. The fire one sets anything on fire and they spontaneously combust. Then, replaying this game for the second time kind of made me realize how broken this weapon is. You can literally just press set an enemy button and they're completely out of your way. And the blue one for explosions, it uses up more energy than the fire or normal spray, but it does more damage than both of them combined. From the reviews I've seen, a lot of people tend to think that the combat kind of slows the game's pacing down to a halt, which I agree with to an extent. Yeah, the combat can get pretty repetitive at times, and when you're fighting bigger bugs, it's kind of annoying, but it does feel pretty good taking out the smaller guys with ease. Plus the bomb spray can pretty much one-shot anything in the blast and you're fine. So yeah, I don't really like the combat that much, but it's not really that bad to be honest. But in general, the platforming in this game is where this game truly shines. Honestly, when this game focuses on the main platforming, it has some of the best platforming bits in the series. Because of Daxter's smaller frame, you can go into levels with a different perspective from what you usually expect when you're playing as Jak. He can climb up surfaces, crawl on monkey bars, and climb on narrow surfaces, and zipline on roads a la Crash 4 style. A lot of these moves are developed throughout the game and are used in pretty clever ways too. The crawling maneuver goes a little bit underutilized. You use it in the first few levels and the last 2 levels of the game to sneak past the guards and go into vents. That's as much use as you'll get out of it. Bug spray is also used as a platforming mechanic too. You can use it to hover over anything, and you can grab these eco ores to hover for as long as you can. In the earlier parts of the game, you could hover over fire for a higher ground, but it's quickly forgotten after the flamethrower was introduced. While this can feel a little bit finicky at times, and there were times where I was desperately holding out the circle, but I was more of fear of me missing the eco orb so I wouldn't get a longer hang time. Overall, the hovering mechanic is alright, and doesn't really have any hindrance to this game as a whole. Daxter is fun to control for the most part. I say for the most part because for some reason, Daxter cannot run straight. This isn't really too bad when you're playing this game with a controller, but it's way more noticeable when you're playing it with a keyboard. And this also might just be a keyboard thing, but I swear sometimes the game just straight up refuses to read my inputs. I know it looks like I'm just bad at the game, but why would I feel the need to just careen off the edge of a cliff? I did try to use my Nintendo Switch controller to play this game, but honestly, that just made it even worse. I then tried using my brother's PS4 controller, and the game felt so much better to control with that. Daxter's movements are pretty quick and precise, and it just made the experience even better for me in general. So yeah, if you plan on playing this game, get it on original hardware, or if you're using a PSP emulator like I am, and if you have a PS4 controller, or maybe a PS5 controller, use that. The platforming in the final level, the prison, uses all the skills that you learned at that point and puts it all to the test like a final level should do. This level also does a pretty good job of making Daxter feel like he's on a rescue mission. You need to sneak past the Crimson guards around the place, and if you don't do it properly, they'll shoot you on sight. This level also uses crawling to its best abilities. This is the only time you'll use it in the, 3 or 4 levels where it's necessary, but it works pretty well in this level, and all leads up to a pretty challenging boss fight. There's 3 phases here. The first phase is pretty much a waiting game where he attacks you a couple of times, and then you wait for him to start charging up and then you blast him with the bomb spray. Then in the second phase, you use the flamethrower to drain the dark eco that's under you guys. Now in the final phase, you can destroy these towers so you can attack them head on. This was a pretty good boss fight and a great way to cap off the game. And probably the best part about this boss fight, if you die in one phase, you don't have to restart the entire boss from the beginning. And since we're already on the topic of bosses, let's talk about the other 2. This game doesn't have that many boss fights, but the only one that's worth mentioning is the final boss, to be honest. The first boss is alright, but this is probably just me, but whenever he fires his purple bomb, I'm usually able to dodge the first one fine, but I swear no matter how much I try or where I am, this green dickhead always knows where I'm about to land when he fires the second bomb. But that's pretty much it, I just wanted to bring that up. The second boss is pretty much the final boss, but not as fun. The tactics that are used to defeat the boss, kinda cool, but other than that, it's pretty meh. While most of the game is spent on foot, there's a couple of vehicle sessions to switch up the gameplay every once in a while. They're usually very brief though. First is the Surface Zoomer, which is used to clean up the dark eco in Breeze Valley, kinda like the Precursor Basin in Precursor Legacy. Now, just like in that game, I don't really think too highly of the Zoomer in this game either. It controls better than the Zoomer in Jak I, but the levels that it uses are just kinda boring. Next is the Ranger Zoomer, which is pretty much like the Surface Zoomer but bigger. It uses an Emerald Isle to take down the bug dragonfly thing. The first time you're chasing it down to bomb it, and while the second time you're shooting it down while it's chasing you. And finally there's a scooter, which makes navigating Haven City faster than it would be on foot. While it's pretty fun to control for the most part sometimes. This is probably a good time to bring this up. Does anyone else feel like Daxter's default speed in this game feels a little bit too slow? At least compared to Jak's in the earlier games. It's not a consistent problem, but I always feel the need to ask for it when I feel like I'm not moving fast enough to get somewhere. And just like in Jak II, Haven City is the main area of the game and how you get from place to place. The entire city could have brought here, or else the PSP would start to catch on fire trying to render a PS2 game on a handheld that's not even smoother than my hair. But what has been recreated, the devs did a pretty good job bringing all that to here. And also there's these mini games where you either press the PlayStation symbols or the D-pad at the right time. Most people don't really mind this, but me personally, I can't stand these, mainly because I had to use A, S, D, and W for the PlayStation symbols, and I keep on forgetting where I mapped the buttons, and also the left keys were where my PlayStation buttons were, and the right keys were where my D-pad was. So what I was used to at this point was completely reversed, when I have to remember that left is PlayStation buttons, and the right is my D-pad. And yes, I know this is technically my fault for not mapping the keys in a way that I was comfortable with, but it just really shows that the games like this weren't built for a keyboard. So most things in this game are pretty well done. There is just one thing that kind of bothers me about the gameplay, and honestly, it doesn't even have to do with the gameplay itself. So one more I talk about the problem about characterization in this game's story, well, that problem also extends during gameplay too, and unfortunately it comes from the Orange Rat himself. So Daxter's entire personality revolves around the fact that he never knows when to shut up. He's always cracking jokes and always has something to say about someone and about the situation that's being brought up. So for someone who's always running his mouth in past games,
I told you we shouldn't have come here, and you listened! What? Okay. I'm fine.
he's completely silent during gameplay. That might have to do with the fact that these levels don't really have anything noteworthy to comment on, but still though, he only has 2 lines during levels in the whole 7 hours of the game, and it's only just him stating the obvious.
Daxter, the management says you've got to destroy every one of those termite mounds before they activate the exit elevator.
My keen exterminator sense tells me that these termite mounds are the problem.
He's his normal stuff during cutscenes, but in gameplay, just dead silence outside of his music and your friends calling you to come somewhere for bug extermination, but that's it. It's just kind of disappointing that Orange Lightning is being his normal talkative self during gameplay.
Dax, get in the car!
Jak! Are you crazy? You ruined my story!
Now!
So let's bring up this game's collectibles. The Precursor orbs are here, but they're not used like they are in Jak 1. Instead of needing 90 Precursor orbs to get this thing, you need to collect them to get Daxter's dream sequences, which are pretty much glorified quick time events, and you know, people don't like those, but thankfully only the first one is mandatory, all the other ones are optional. The dream segments are all parodies of popular movies, like The Matrix, Braveheart, Lord of the Rings, and more. Completing them gives Daxter either more health or new moves, which are whipped straight from Jak's moveset from the other games. You won't really use them throughout the game that much, so yeah. Getting more health is cool and all, but you can beat the game without upgrading your health. It's not exactly the hardest game you'll come across. Then there's the Metalhead orbs, which instead of being used to unlock a new move, they're used as a way to access certain places, which I guess is kind of cool, but by the end of each level, I already passed the quota for Metalhead orbs that were required. In some levels, I got every single orb that was there. Honestly, I completely forgot that they needed access in the other levels until someone brought it up in another review. I feel like they should have had Precursor orb locked behind the level and Metalhead orbs to unlock the dream level. While Precursor orbs aren't hard to find, it isn't easy to get them all in one level, as like the Metalhead orbs. And when I finished the game, I had like 600 Precursor orbs, and to be honest, I don't really feel need to want to 100% the game other than to unlock the Daxter mobile on Jak X, but even then I'm playing this on an emulator and not a PSP, so I wouldn't be able to do that anyway. Level design in this game is pretty confident, they're all pretty linear and straightforward, and there is the occasional where am I going moments, but the moment does a pretty good job in guiding you into where you need to go, and subtly too. It doesn't give you instructions like, hey dumbass, go over here, it lets you figure it out for yourself. Honestly, the game isn't too hard. There are some moments where there are really close calls during platforming. Some of these I'm not even sure how I was able to survive. Now, there are 3 levels that are more open-ended and ditch the linear level design of the normal levels. In these levels, you look for crystals, destroy eggs, and kill bugs. There are those where am I going moments in this game, and no other moment in this game I felt this way the most was when I was playing these levels. The third one isn't that bad since the design level isn't as open as the first two, but the first two are a complete pain to navigate since everything looks the same. Just look at my footage here sped up. Nothing here sticks out. Just be spending a long time just looking for a missing crystal or one egg. But then again, that's only in 3 levels, and even then, it only gets worse in 2 levels. While most of the levels are smooth sailing, I almost forgot to mention that this game has a mode called Bug Combat. As you play through the game, you collect these potions and bugs to play through bug combat. This mode pretty much takes those bugs and pits them against each other in what's essentially a Pokemon battle. It's nothing really special, I just thought I should bring that up. I know it's gonna be that one guy who's gonna start whining if I don't. Alright, so let's talk about the graphics. For 2006, and for one of the first PSP games, the visuals are gorgeous. Yeah, not as pretty as the PS2 game, but considering how early this game came out during the PSP's life, this game still looks pretty nice. They're gonna go with the Jak II and Jak III route with having the characters have a lot of detail during cutscenes, to completely downgrading them in order to get the game running smoothly, which I guess I can get on that, seeing that this is a handheld game and that's to be expected. But part of me kind of wishes that they told the story using the in-game models, because the cutscenes in this game are pre-rendered, so they can come out a little bit pixelated. And also, it is a little bit disappointing cutscenes to be rendered in 60 FPS, but the regular game is rendered in 30. Like, I don't care that much about frame rate. I just find that kind of weird. And also, I want to point this out real quick. When Daxter is standing idle, he puts the bug zapper away, but when the player moves him again, he brings it back out. Nothing really special, I just wanted to talk about that. This game also has a pretty decent soundtrack. Well, they don't really go as hard on the OST like in Jak X. Honestly, they didn't need to. They just kept in line with the original trilogy by making it more adventurous and mysterious vibe to the music, and I think it worked out in their favor. My favorite track might be the credits theme. So in conclusion, Daxter is a pretty fun game from start to finish. Yeah, the story was a little bit disappointing to me as a Jak and Daxter fan, but the core game it's pretty fun stuff. There are a couple of things that either bother me or straight up piss me off, and while the combat's pretty weak, the main platforming is what the game gets right, and in the end, that's all I could ask for in a Jak and Daxter game. For this first game, Radiodon did an excellent job at bringing the platforming games from PS2 to the portable scene. While I wouldn't recommend dropping every single console you have just to get a PSP game from 2006, but if you're able to emulate it, then go for it just to see if you would like it or not. I mean, for the prices that this game goes for on eBay, if you have a PSP, you wouldn't lose too much sleep after adding this game into your collection. It just kind of sucks that this game was only on a handheld that not many people cared about. It's also kind of weird how out of the Ratchet and Clank and Jak and Daxter games on PSP, this was the only one that didn't get a PS2 port, which is weird because honestly, this game would be too out of place on the PS2. But if I'm being honest, I don't really see a reason to go back to this game other than a Let's Play or for 100% completion. I mean, I still enjoyed myself with this game, but there's nothing here that makes me want to play it again outside of the platforming. But at the very least, this was better than the fate Clank had on this console. When that's first release, it met with high review scores, with 8, 9s, and even 10s going around. It would even get the greatest label later on. But for a while, this was the last Jak and Daxter game that was made for a couple of years. But that's all for this video. I'm sorry to say that this is going to be the last review for the year. I'm sorry, but I really don't think I have enough time to make another one. And also, I won't be doing anything until the new year, so yeah. So next time we meet, we're going to be looking at the last Jak and Daxter game in the series, Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier.
Finish it! Finish it! Evil!
Jak and Daxter, one of the best franchises ever conceived. Great characters, fun platforming, and some of the best graphics of its time. And while most franchises aren't very consistent in quality, Jak and Daxter stayed very consistent even when other developers took over Daxter on the PSP. They're one of the few game series that has never had a bad game in their library. So how the fuck did this game happen? So, Jak and Daxter: The Lost Frontier. I mean, what can I say? This game's awful. I'm not gonna act like I don't know how good this game's gonna be. Like, I know it's just terrible. And what really sucks that this game didn't have to be. It starts out pretty well, but then it just nosedived into something I never want to revisit again. And it's sad because the game had potential, and it had some pretty good ideas. And sometimes it can be pretty fun too, but all the bad things just overshadow the good moments. Well, might as well get into the history of this game first. So Lost Frontier started off as Jak IV, that follows the story after Jak X. However, Naughty Dog decided to stop working on the project entirely and hand it off to High Impact Games. You know, the same developers who made such great games like Secret Agent Clank and Ratchet and Clank Size Matters.
Do you not have somewhere else to go? Home to your family, perhaps?
Hey, Cork. Nice hat.
The game was originally supposed to be a PSP exclusive, but then it was ported to the PS2 later. For this review, I'm going to be looking at the PSP version because honestly, it's more convenient for me and I don't really want to spend any money on this game. And I've also heard how the PS2 version can crash sometimes and I don't want to go through that. So we start off with the game and this is our title screen, just a JPEG. I know I can't be too critical since the PSP's hardware is more limited than PS2, but still, Daxter's title screen on the same console had more personality than this game. Well, I barely started talking about this game, and I'm already finding things to bitch about. With that being said, let's talk about the story. I would give you a spoiler warning, but honestly, I don't think this game's story deserves one. The game starts off with Jak, Daxter, and Kira, who looks nothing like she did in the original trilogy, flying into storm during an ego drought. So barely 5 seconds in, and I have to point something out. Isn't ego basically the equivalent to atoms in this universe? How would it be able to run out like that? It just doesn't make any sense, but literally seconds later, they get chased down by sky pirates. Jak then starts to fight one of the pirates, Phoenix, and then Daxter accidentally shoots a piece of a plane. Jak then tries to go dark, but he can't because
Ego is too unstable!
Which is pretty much forgotten about later on, but I'll get to that later. They then crash land on the brink, which only exists because the Precursor ran out of land to make. Like I said, they just forgot to finish and nobody found out about it till now, which just raises so many questions, but it's probably best to save that for another video. Anyway, Kira tells Jak to find anything on the island, then finds crystals of green eco, which helps fix the plane. They see pirates attacking their ships, so they go to protect it and meets Duke Skyheed, who immediately trusts these random people that he just met, which Jak tries to handle, but he can't control their power in probably the most awkward animation I've ever seen. After Jak goes on a test to prove how strong he is, Phoenix takes the eco seeker and kidnaps Kira. Jak then goes after him in a very slow chase segment, only gets shot out of the sky and crash to land again. He meets this old guy, and I'm just gonna call him Old Man because this game never gives him a name. This guy was literally in 2 scenes, now he's one of the main characters now. Anyway, the old man fixes his ship, and now they go back to Phoenix, but then Kira forces them to become best friends because she starts developing feelings for him somehow. Yeah, who cares that Jak saved the world from a man whose jaw is disconnected from the rest of his head, a giant bug monster, Bender from Futurama, and saves his friends after getting poisoned? This guy who Kira literally met 20 seconds ago was way better. They also lose a piece of the Ego Seeker, and it fell out of the right window, and somehow the left window broke instead. I also forgot to mention that in one scene, Daxter falls into a vent and gets turned into...
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that?
Okay, so Daxter fell in the vat of eco in the first game and got turned into an Ottsel, and after Jak 3, it was established that since the Precursor are also Ottsels, that makes Daxter a Precursor too. But there's just one problem with that. In Jak 3, the Dark Makers are Precursors who gone bad, who touch Dark Eco, and somehow Daxter's becomes this with more Dark Eco, and this cool badass version of Daxter, the loading screens for his levels are a goddamn slide. And they barely even acknowledge it in the story too. Once Daxter transforms in front of everyone else, all Jak can say is,
"Hey Dax, putting on some pounds."
Great! Now I've got 2 monsters to worry about.
So after they find all pieces of the Eco Seeker, Skyheed reveals that he's actually evil and he experiments the Dark Eco on other people. Later, Jak encounters Skyheed and he absorbs a bunch of Dark Eco and transforms into his dark form. Before Jak can deal with a final hit, Skyheed retreats back to the airship. Phoenix then sacrifices himself to damage the behemoth so it can be destroyed. Once Jak does that, balance of the Eagle is restored. Jak and Kira share the ugliest kiss I've ever seen, and then they decide to go investigate Event Beyond the Brink, and after that the game ends. Honestly, this game's story is probably one of the worst things about it. The story alone destroys anything the game might have had going for it. All the characters in the story are either uninteresting or barely in the game at all. This game really has a bad habit of making random characters who had 5 minutes of screen time into a main character out of nowhere. Phoenix has no personality outside of trying to steal Kira away from Jak, and when he sacrifices, it's supposed to be an emotional moment, and then Jak tries to restore the behemoth for Phoenix, but he barely interacts with anyone outside of Jak and Kira. And the main characters don't even act like themselves. Jak's basically every good natured hero you see and doesn't even have his goatee anymore. Kira's just really boring and there's nothing interesting about her, and Daxter might be the worst example of this. I know I gave Daxter a lot of shit for not having Daxter talking during gameplay, but in those games they know the writing for him to be a likable douchebag. But in this game he's just insufferable, none of his jokes ever land, and in the game he just repeats the same lines if you die after a checkpoint. Everything that the character says just one ear and out the other for me. I'll take Daxter's story over this game, even with that game's weird storytelling elements. Honestly, it's no wonder why people don't consider this game canon along with the other games in the series. So at first glance, The Lost Frontier looks like a pretty typical Jak and Daxter game, and yeah, it seems like everything checks out. So if you play the Precursor Legacy, then you play Lost Frontier. If you play Jak III, then you play Lost Frontier. Jak can still punch, uppercut, spin, body slam, but for some reason, Jak can't long jump anymore, which is weird because it's not like High Impact doesn't know how to program that. Not only that, but since Jak can't roll or long jump anymore, Jak has to use a double jump spin maneuver to make jumps that I swear he will be able to make fine with the long jumping, but you know, that's fine. Jumping in general feels really stiff too. Might be the animation. It looks like whenever Jak jumps, there's a hand constantly pushing him down. Combat is also pretty annoying too. Punching and spinning enemies just doesn't feel as satisfying as it used to in past games. Even Daxter. And also some enemies take way too long to take down, so it can evolve in just pressing square and circle over and over again. Instead of a natural gun, Jak gets his staff, which has all of his gun mods, but it doesn't have weapon upgrades like in Jak III. It's basically the same version of the Scattergun, Morph Gun, and the Vulcan's Fury throughout the entire game. And you don't even get the Peacemaker, you just get this worse version of it. I forgot what it's called, so I'm just gonna call it the Green Gun. It shoots out green bombs, which sounds cool, but ultimately, it's just a Peacemaker but nerfed. You also can't auto-lock onto enemies like in Jak 2 and 3, so getting an accurate shot on these enemies can get really annoying. And also in its PS2 version of the game, instead of pressing triangle to shoot your gun, it's R1 instead. Like, huh? Like, what was wrong with using triangle to shoot? Like, it's not anything bad, I just thought it was kind of weird. But other than that, the game starts out pretty fine. The platforming is pretty mediocre, but it can be pretty fun sometimes. After you defeat an enemy, you collect our Ego, but instead of turning into Dark Jak, trade them for Ego power-ups with Kira. I like this idea, it kind of adds more depth to the combat instead of just spamming circle or square. There's also new Ego power-ups that Jak can use, like using red Ego and then shooting at it to blow it up, blue Ego to slow down time, and green Ego to turn into a ball. So remember when I said that Jak can turn into Dark Jak because the Ego's too unstable? So why can't Jak use these with no problems? That's just another consistency problem with the story, but honestly, some of these are actually pretty cool because they actually make you use your head. Some of the puzzles in this game actually made me think about what I was doing. I mean, the gameplay is definitely nowhere near perfect, it does have its flaws. First off, there's this really shitty camera. This game's camera can be a real fickle fuck. It can get obscured by any object in the way, and sometimes just spazzes out of control and from the slightest movements. And then there's the loading screens. The Jak trilogy has been known for next to no loading screen structure. Tried clever ways to load the game without taking control out of the player. Here the game fucking dies every time it has to load a new level. Not only that, but also just takes the experience away from the player too. Just freezes whenever entering somewhere and then it just loads like nothing happened. There's also some quick time events and they're not good. It just makes you mash buttons and rotate the analog stick repeatedly, and it's just tedious and repetitive. But then there's the other gameplay style that this game has. First up we have Jak Daxter. He's basically a top-down beat-em-up style, except that you do boring puzzles and the levels just drag on and on. Say what you want about the Werehog from Sonic Unleashed, but at least he had a number of combos you can use at your disposal. Here's just the same 1-2 combo over and over again. He can just turn into the Tasmanian Devil and throw Dark Ego at spiders, but that's all he can do. You just spam throughout the entire level too, and just gets really repetitive really quickly. But that has nothing on what I'm about to talk about next. So this game follows the mission structure from Jak 2 and 3, but unlike Jak 2 and 3, this game isn't open world. Most of the locations in this game have areas in which you can fly planes or land to move around, but you can only fly to completely new locations by flying with the Phantom Blade. The Phantom Blade is pretty much the main hub of the game, from which you can purchase upgrades to your plane with scrap, as well as upgrades to your eco powers with new eco skills with Dark Eco. Now the plane itself is slow, sluggish, and it's just dragging to one place to another. Even when you try boosting, it only enhances your speed by 2%, and in 50% of the game you're only flying the damn plane. And I know I shit all over Jak 3's cars, but at least those were only relegated to getting from one place to another and weren't one of the main focuses of the fucking game. There's 4 types of planes that you can fly: the Interceptor, the Sky Raider, the Hellcat, and the Bomber. All of them suck. Of course, with plane gameplay, there has to be aerial combat, and this is where the game goes from just a below average platformer to one of the worst games I've ever played. Like, I'm not joking. When I say this part of the game frustrated the fuck out of me, it really frustrated the fuck out of me. This is by far the worst thing in the entire series. It's not that bad in the first half, but they really cram it down your throat in the second half. It's almost like High Impact thought the planes were going to be the best thing that the franchise has ever seen. All you do here is shoot everything and just pray to God that you don't die, because barrel rolling doesn't do shit in terms of defending yourself, which means that you'll be dying over and over and over again. And then there's the one mission where you have to blow up 3 missiles 3 times in a row, and each time is worse than the last. I would honestly rather play the final third of Jak II 7 times before I ever play this mission again, and that's saying something. And not to mention, if you do anything that's hit the wall just a tiny bit, the plane starts having a cardiac arrest, or you just clip through the entire object, which hurts you and you can't get out of it, so you have no other choice to just restart the mission or just wait until you die. No one even helps you out either, just shooting down all these torrents, risking your life while all your friends are just sitting on your asses eating cake. You can use scrap to upgrade your plane with weapon mods that you can use by jacking other planes, but honestly, I completely forgot about that, so I don't even bother. And also, when you're forced to play a dogfighting mission that you weren't warned about, you can't switch into another plane, so you have to do it with that plane that you're using in the first place. Who the fuck thought that was a good idea? Boss fights are awful. Some of them can be fun to beat, but some of them are just straight up irritating, and sometimes the tactics to beat them aren't clear at all. I hate this one in particular, where I have to get the piece of the eco seeker out of this woman's hand, but I swear he gets a chance of hitting me before I can hit her, and the game doesn't even show me getting hit, it just jumps to her just standing there. The final chase segment is really boring. All you're doing is chasing down Sky Heat with no strategy or nothing, just shooting him down while you're avoiding getting shot. After you spend hours chasing him, the mission ends like nothing ever happened. So this game has precursor orbs, and how you get them is either by doing missions or just finding them throughout each level. Whether this encourages replayability, I'll leave that up to you. But I will admit that it was pretty cool that how the precursor orbs make the same sound that they do when you collect them in Precursor Legacy. Last thing I want to talk about in terms of gameplay is that this game also has New Game Plus. Just like the Jak games before, this game also has a hero mode, but unlike the past games, you can unlock it right after you finish the game for the first time. When you play the game in this mode, all your gun mods, armor, eco powers, and playing in their mods and upgrades, and unspent precursor orbs carry on to the new game. I'm using someone else's footage because I'm not going to play this game a second time, and really why would I when I'm only going to spend like 30 seconds talking about the New Game Plus. But finally, we're at the final parts of the video, so let's talk about this game's graphics. Graphically, this game looks fucking ugly, and I know there's gonna be a bunch of people in the comments saying, oh, you can't say that, it's a PSP game, of course it's gonna look like ass, but honestly, that's not even an excuse. Daxter came out on the same console 3 years before this game, and that game used the console limitations to its advantage. That thing's a little lots of colors, and it's pretty vibrant too. Even in Jak II, Haven City had dark colors, but once you get out of Haven City, you're immediately brought back to the colorful world of Jak and Daxter. Here, the color palettes only consist of washed out grays, greens, and browns. And this game's cutscenes look like shit too. The characters look like they were ripped out of a college student's first animation project. If it wasn't for Jak, Daxter, and Kira, I wouldn't even know that this was a Jak and Daxter game. And even then, some of the characters don't even look like themselves. Jak and Daxter look fine, but what the fuck did they do to Kira? I feel like they were going for an older version of her in this game, judging by the concept art, but this is a case where what looks good in 2D doesn't really translate well in 3D. The cutscenes look like ass, the character models barely emote, the lip syncing somehow looks worse than the game that came out 8 years before it, and overall graphical presentation is probably the worst the series has ever produced. Soundtrack of this game is really forgettable. I know I said the same thing for Jak 1 and 2, but this is probably the worst example of this. At least in the aforementioned games, I can at least remember some of the songs from those games. I honestly couldn't remember a song in this game to save my life. It's just generic action music stuff, and sometimes the songs just don't even play at all. The voice acting is nothing to speak of either, except for the fact that Jak has a new voice actor, Josh Keaton, but he doesn't put any effort in his performance, to be honest. Listen to this guy compared to Mike Irwin.
My name is Core. May I help?
You look like a reasonably smart man. I want information. Where the hell am I?
They have the frontier for helpless travelers.
Oh, we're not helpless. Dax, get on the gun.
Just what an awful way for the series to go out on. It's not that this is just a terrible game in general, but it didn't need to be. I was expecting this game to be a complete dumpster fire of a game, but when I first started playing, and even in the later segments where all you're doing is platforming, I felt like the game had potential. Platforming can be fun, and some of the eco power-ups, and while some were unnecessary, others were actually pretty fun, and were actually required for some pretty good puzzle solving. And I'm actually being serious when I say that too. But when we get to all the playing stuff, the game goes from just pretty mediocre to fucking horrendous. So yeah, the game might be bad, but I feel like someone actually tried to make a decent game, and I can respect that. But it's just that the game had so little polish that it just resulted into a poor gaming experience, and on top of that, the story was just stupid and didn't make any sense, while the characters didn't even act like themselves or were just bland and uninteresting. When Lost Frontier first released, it met with generally positive reviews, and it was eventually forgotten about, and High Impact went on to make some masterpieces like Disney Princess My Fairy Tale Adventure, and then went broke 2 years later. So with all that being said, fuck Lost Frontier. It does such a poor job in trying to recapture what made Jak and Daxter so great in the first place, that the game's just complete ass. I can only really recommend this game to the most die-hard Jak and Daxter fans out there. It's not a game where you just laugh at it being glitchy and everything. Like, it's an actually functioning game with terrible controls and even worse gameplay. While what I played wasn't the worst game of all time, without a doubt in my mind, it's by far the worst Jak game. This is one game I'm never playing again. This was also the last game in the series. It wasn't the last game that Jak and Daxter was featured in. Jak and Daxter also appeared in Sony Move Heroes, along with Ratchet and Clank, Sly and Bentley, which would have been cool if this wasn't just a tech demo for their PlayStation Move. Then there's Sony All-Stars Battle Royale, but nobody really cares about that game, so it's pretty safe to say that Jak and Daxter are pretty much dead and aren't getting a new game anytime soon. While Ratchet and Clank are still alive and well now, and all with rumors going around, maybe even Sly Cooper could be making a comeback soon, but it doesn't seem likely that Jak and Daxter will be making that comeback either, until Naughty Dog makes Jak 4 anyway. But that's it. I've reviewed every single Jak game in the series, and it was fun finally playing Jak X and Daxter for the first time. But while this will be the last review I'll make on the series, we're actually not done with Jak and Daxter yet. I still have one more video planned for Jak and Daxter, but it's going to be a little bit more different compared to everything else I've done on the series. But if you're in my Discord server, they know what I'm talking about. With that out of the way, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace. So at the end of my Lost Frontier video, I teased that I was going to make another video on Jak and Daxter, and that video is going to be me ranking all the Jak games from worst to best. Now the hard thing about ranking this series is that none of the games are inherently terrible. The series has been pretty consistent since the first Jak game all the way up to Daxter on the PSP. I mean, it doesn't mean that they're flawless, but it's still pretty cool how this series doesn't really have that many bad games. So before we start this ranking, I just want to know that this is all my opinion, so it's okay for you to disagree with me, especially with number 1. So if your favorite game isn't at the top of the list, please don't go crying in the comments, because you're just wasting your energy. So that being said, let's start the list off with the worst.
We won't let those fuckers take this land!
I mean, what the f do you want me to say? This is probably one of the biggest missed potential of a game that I've ever played. And honestly, I was going into this game thinking that I was going to absolutely hate it, but instead, I just came out more sad knowing that the game could have been better. And honestly, that might even be worse. The platforming is pretty solid, and even the ego powers are actually a pretty decent addition to the game, because there's some pretty challenging puzzles that felt really rewarding once you beat them. But then when we get to all the other stuff, the game just goes downhill so fast. The combat in this game is annoying, it just devolves into button mashing, the gun gameplay doesn't have the depth that it did in Jak 2 and 3, plus you don't even get the weapon upgrades like in Jak 3, all the environments in this game are ugly, they're completely empty, and the quick time events are repetitive and require no skill whatsoever, and I don't know why they did this to Daxter, and the playing gameplay is so bad. I know I spent like 5 minutes ranting about how much the planes suck in the review, but I just can't help it. The planes in this game are garbage, and they're probably the worst part of the game, probably the franchise too. They also use the planes to hide the fact that this game is an open world, and just makes traveling in this game just such a drag, and the less said about the dogfighting missions, the better. It's not that the story's any better either. I don't want to spend too much time on the story, so I'll try to be as brief as I can. It's about how Jak, Daxter, and Kira are going through an ego drought. Not only the story is a mess, but it just isn't entertaining for me either. The characters are boring, and the models barely even emote either. Jak and Kira are so bland that you can replace them with cardboard cutouts and you get the exact same results. And even though Daxter can be a little bit annoying in the past, this is probably the worst written version of Orange Lightning. Not only that, but there's so many inconsistencies in the story if we're taking the other games into account. 1. How can ego just run out? Everything in the Jak and Daxter universe is made out of ego. Wouldn't that mean that the very thing that they're standing on would just completely vanish? 2. Jak can't turn into Dark Jak because the ego is too unstable. So if that's true, then why the f can he use ego powers whenever he pleases? And just to add on to that, why can't Jak turn into Dark Jak, but Daxter can turn into this? And 4. In Jak 4, it was confirmed that Daxter was a precursor because of Precursor offals, and since Daxter was already a precursor, he would have turned into a Dark Maker since those are precursors were tainted by Dark Ego. Did the writers just not realize how stupid this story was? Overall, this game is terrible, but I don't really feel comfortable calling it the worst game I've ever played. I mean, don't get me wrong, the game's still shit, but in the platforming segments, it feels like there is actual effort put into this game. But just because the game has effort put in it doesn't automatically make it good, but it's definitely something that I can appreciate. But when you get the same team who made the 2 most hated Ratchet and Clank games in the series, something's gonna get lost.
There she is! Let's get her! Ratchet, do you notice anything unusual about Luna?
Well, she does seem to have an unusually large door in the back of her head.
Are you pulling my dick, bro?
So while I don't think that this game is outright atrocious, I still agree that's a pretty poor excuse for a Jak and Daxter game. And here's something that I forgot to mention in my review of the game. Naughty Dog themselves said that the game sucks. They even said that they were so disappointed that the last Jak and Daxter game in the series was a shitty PSP spin-off. I mean, I can go on about how much this game sucks, but I already made an entire video on it, so let's just move on.
Oh shit! I can't!
So Lost Frontier was the only game in the series that was actually awful. So now we're getting into the part of the series where the games aren't bad, but aren't amazing either. I'd comfortably say that these games are pretty mid. Still pretty great games, but I wouldn't say they're amazing though. Starting off this section, we have this PSP spin-off, Daxter. Daxter is actually a pretty decent game, and it was the first game that wasn't developed by Naughty Dog, and it was developed by Ready at Dawn, and it was their first game too. So this game takes place in between Jak I and Jak II, from 2 years from when Jak got kidnapped by the Baron, and so the story goes up 2 weeks before Jak was saved by Daxter. Yeah, storytelling isn't really this game's strongest aspect either. I don't think it's as bad as Lost Frontier, but it's definitely the weakest part of the game. Most of the characters in this game aren't really that interesting, and some of them are just copies of other Jak characters. I already said that Tarn was just Ashlyn, but Simon is pretty much the sculptor from the first game, and Caden was a pretty bland villain, but I would definitely take this game's story over Lost Frontier. But the gameplay picks up the pieces though. This game kinda has the same mission structure from Jak II, but the missions take longer to complete. Haven City is still the main hub of the game, but it isn't as expansive as it is in Jak II, which makes sense since it's on the PSP. Most of the missions involve bug extermination. There are uses of the Zoomer in Breeze Valley, or the Ranger Zoomer at an Emerald Isle to complete other objectives. Then there's the Dream Mode side missions, which don't really have anything to do with the story, but can teach Daxter a new technique, which are ripped straight out of Jak's moveset, or upgrade his hit points. The combat in this game is honestly kinda janky. Daxter has a swatter where he can do closer range combat, which is kinda cool at first, but then after a while it just gets kinda repetitive. The spray gun is your ranged weapon, but you have 3 different versions of them. First is a regular spray gun, which does a lot of damage on smaller bugs. Next is the flamethrower, which pretty much incinerates bigger bugs, or just makes them spontaneously combust. Finally, there's the electric bomb, which takes up more fuel on the spray gun, but has a bigger blast radius. Next is the vehicles, which are all pretty brief. The scooter is for navigating Haven City faster, the service zoomer and the ranger zoomer is for the missions in Breeze Valley and Emerald Isle. You only do these kinds of missions 4 times, and they don't really take that much time in the gameplay either. Honestly, out of every game in the entire series, this game manages to keep it 75% platforming and 25% other stuff. Ready at Dawn did a pretty top-notch job on the platforming in this game. The level design is pretty good too, and they accommodate for Daxter's smaller frame, like how he can crawl, climb, and zipline too. Besides the crawl, all these moves have pretty good uses throughout the game, and they're pretty fun to use too. You can also use the spray gun to hover over big gaps, and there's a lot of fun platforming with that too. My favorite levels in this game are probably the Baron's Palace and the prison levels. These are pretty great final levels. It tests everything you know about the game at this point and puts all your skills to the test. It's also all pretty challenging too. I know I've already said this, but the prison level does a really great job making Daxter feel like he's on a secret mission, because you're sneaking around the Crimson Guard, and the level's just really fun too. But the game isn't perfect though. I do have one problem with the game, and that's to do with control. Daxter is pretty fun for the most part, but for some reason, and I don't see many people talk about this in their reviews, but Daxter just can't run straight. Like, Daxter just can't run in a straight line without shifting over to the left a little bit. You have to make sure that the analog is precisely facing forwards, but other than that, I don't have anything to complain about with Daxter. The other gameplay styles don't really satisfy me that much, but the core platform of the game is probably some of the best platforming the series has ever seen. So without much I've been praising this game a lot, you're probably wondering why it's pretty low on the list. Well, mainly it's because I don't really see myself coming back to this game like I will with the original trilogy, or maybe even Jak X. I did like the game, but I just don't really have a reason to come back to it other than 100% completion to get the Daxter Mobile on Jak X, but I don't have a PSP to get on my PS2, and even then, I could just get the PS4 version of Jak X and just get the Daxter Mobile there, and also maybe a Let's Play, but that's all I could think of. I think if I played this game when I was like 5 years old maybe, then I would probably spend dozens of hours on this game, but now, yeah, maybe not too much. But other than that, Daxter did a pretty good job on just being a portable Jak game that someone can play on the go, at least better than Lost Frontier did anyway. But I just have one question. When is Daxter going to be on the PS5? We brought Jak X to the PS4, so what's taking so long, Sony?
It's over. Get out of my car now.
It said 1760.
Get out of my car now!
Sir, it said...
Get out of my car now!
So this might be a little bit of a hot take, but Jak 3 is definitely my least favorite in the trilogy. I still think that it's a good game, but I just don't think that it holds up as well as the first 2 games. This game is basically just Jak 2 except in the desert and without the huge difficulty spike. I mean, there is still some positives about Jak 3. I think the story is best out of the trilogy. I mean, it starts out slow when you're in the desert, but it's supposed to pick up once you get back to Haven City. There's still some problems I have with Jak 3's story though. Kira was completely ruined this game. She was casted aside so Ashlyn could be the main love interest in this game, which was completely forgot about in Jak X, but whatever. And that resulted in making her a shell of her former self, with like 3 to 4 lines in the entire game. Another problem I have with this game's story is honestly Jak himself. When Ashlyn begs him to come back to Haven City, Jak says that he doesn't care about what happens to the people in there since they banished him, but as soon as he comes back to Haven City, he's completely excited to see Samus and Kira, and also later on he says that he has his own interests, but said interests were never really explained or given any depth. That might have to do with the fact that there was only 1 year of development between Jak 2 and Jak 3. All the ambitious stuff they had planned for this story didn't really reach their full potential. Then there's a big reveal about the Precursors being assholes, which some might have found this kind of funny, but me personally, I just thought it was kind of disappointing. I think Samuel says it best here.
My life's work, it turns out, was spent searching for a bunch of furballs.
So the story might have its problems, but I still enjoyed it for what it was. The gameplay is basically the same from Jak II, but this time there's a lot less focus on running and gunning gameplay that the series has been known for, and it's honestly for this reason I don't really like this game as much as Jak II or even Precursor Legacy. There's just way too many mini games in Jak III. The biggest change in gameplay are the cars, and they kinda suck. They're not awful, but they definitely haven't aged that well in my opinion. I mean, I still take this over flying in Lost Frontier, but they still aren't really that fun. Their physics are completely slippery and everything trips you over, which makes me even more glad that they fixed the car physics in Jak X, but we're not there yet. Other than that, the minigames are either good, bad, or just downright terrible, and am I the only one who got Mr. Ruby flashbacks from Sly Cooper from this minigame? My favorite parts of this game are just me platforming and shooting a couple enemies, but this game is only 40% platforming, the other 60% is vehicle sections. I mean, the difficulty curve has been toned down since Jak II, and the checkpoints are so much more generous, but this game just doesn't really focus that much on a traditional Jak and Daxter running and gunning gameplay. I know this game is a lot of people's favorite in the trilogy, and if you're one of those people, then just don't care about what I say. Keep enjoying the game if you want, but I just don't really like this game as much as I used to. I mean, the game's still pretty fun when it's just platforming, but that's pretty much it. But now we're getting on to the games that I personally consider the best in the entire series, so let's start off with...
I don't think you have any idea how fast I really am. I'm fast as fuck, boy!
Now what can I say about Jak X that I haven't already said in my review of the game? Honestly, I think I might like it just as much, maybe even more than Crash Team Racing. Like, I'm being serious right now, that's how much I like this game. This game's driving mechanics has so much more depth than CTR. While some of the game modes aren't that good, most of them are more hit than miss in my opinion. And the music's probably the best in the series. I also love how it's one of those games where you need to master your skills, and it feels really satisfying when you perfect everything in this game. Like, the power sliding mechanics are a perfect example of this. Like, when you first start out, power sliding might be pretty frustrating to do in this game, but once you figure out that you can do a complete 180 whenever you're power sliding, then you'll be able to pull off sharp turns in this game in no time. And the track design is really good too. I personally like racing games that are a bit more non-linear and have more shortcuts that you can take. But honestly, how the cars handle this game, I think the track design works because the heavier handling physics, trying to pull off tight turns every second might not be as fun. I mean, the sitting and silver levels still suck though, but that's only the really bad levels in this game. I also love how there's different types of races in this game too. There's long races, short races, some of them are even one lap. I like that kind of design. It gives you more time to try and come out in the first place. Sometimes some of these races are so long that I keep on figuring that the second half was the last one, and I barely scratched the surface on what makes this game so great, like the cool secrets that you can unlock, like playing as Daxter, or Precursor, or even playing as older versions of Jak, or even playing as the characters from Daxter in this game too. And there's the Daxter mobile you get when you have 100% save all as Daxter. You can even play as Ratchet too. So much about this game is so great, but there is one reason why I don't rate it any higher, and it's something that Naughty Dog usually gets right: the story. I mean, I think the story is still better than Daxter and The Lost Frontier, but I don't think it's as good as Jak II or Jak III. But to be fair, there aren't really that many problems with this game's story. In fact, Naughty Dog even rectified one of their mistakes in Jak III and turned Hero back to her normal self, and she and Jak finally get that kiss too, so it's a win for everyone. But yeah, this game's pretty amazing. I don't think I've played a racing game where I've actually wanted to get better at playing it. The only other game that comes to mind is actually the other car races that Naughty Dog made, CTR. Here, I want to get better. Like, I want to come out top in every race. I mean, I could keep on gushing about why I love this game, but, you know, there's already a review for that, so let's move on to the final two games.
Looks like it will only open if we fill all 100 holes with power cells.
Oh boy, here we go again!
No, I didn't make an editing error. Jak I isn't first on my list. I know there's going to be a bunch of people saying how wrong I am, but at least in my opinion. So this game's probably the furthest thing from a bad game. In fact, I actually think it's pretty excellent. In fact, I think it's probably one of the best games on the PS2. I mean, like, where to start? The near perfect platforming, the low free areas, the beautiful landscapes, the amazing level design, the great collectibles. It's honestly hard to find anything to hate about this game. The platform in this game is so great, and the controls too. Jak controls really smooth, and its physics have that perfect balance of not being too heavy while also not being too floaty either. And almost every death you'll suffer from is mostly your own fault. And the level design too, like, it's so top notch, and they make the already perfect control feel so much better than they already do. The feeling of exploration is apparent as soon as the first level. You find these Precursor ores go into another area, you follow the trail of Precursor ores, and you're immediately onto another level. And that feeling's also in the final boss, you're riding a huge elevator instead. And when you consider how early this game came out during the PS2's life, this is a pretty impressive feat. Then there's the other stuff like the Flood. The thing is still fun to ride. I just wish there were more levels with it, but because it was way more fun than the Zoomer. I don't really think too highly of the zoomer in this game. It's not really bad, but a whole level dedicated to it was pretty unnecessary. Honestly, the only one thing I don't like about this game. So much stuff to enjoy here. I like the platforming challenges to collect power cells and precursor ores, and how it doesn't feel like there's too many collectibles in this game while still having enough to keep people entertained for a little while. I played this game so many times, I actually deleted save files just to start a new game. That's how much I love this game. So I can already hear you guys typing in the comments, well man, if you like this game so much, then why is it only at number 2? I mean, I do love this game. I honestly go as far as saying this is one of my favorite PS2 games, but there's still some problems I have with the game though. Aside from Daxter, Jak 1 is probably the easiest game in the series. That might be because I've been playing this game for a while now. I'm not really a god at this game or a speedrunner, but I've been playing this game for a really long time, so I'm bound to be pretty good at it. But yeah, this game is pretty easy, but most of the difficulty comes from collecting all the precursor orbs and power cells, which even then is still pretty easy. And the game's also pretty short too. Even though I played it multiple times, it only took me 6 hours to beat the game. Even when I live streamed the game when I did in like 2020, well, it's really almost been like 2 years since I've done that stream. Both lengths of those streams combined goes up to 6 hours long, and that's collecting all the precursor orbs and power cells too. And also all the characters in this game that you interact with are complete pieces of cardboard. Not the main characters though, they're fine. Those people you meet inside the worlds are just all people who want you to do this thing for a power cell. I'd rather pay them 90 precursor orbs, and the secret ending kind of sucks too, but it's kind of for that reason why I don't like Jak 1 as much as the top pick. I know people will find the difficulty in this game's short length as positive, so it all results in a pretty relaxing experience that you'll complete in over a weekend, but not for me personally. So now let's get to what, in my opinion, is the best Jak and Daxter game.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for.
Preparing the best Jak and Daxter game.
Okay, so hear me out. I know a lot of people don't like Jak II that much, but in my opinion, this is probably my favorite game in the entire series. There's so many great changes that this game brings to the series as a whole. First, let's talk about the story first. Jak 1 had a pretty basic story about finding all the collectibles in the game, but here, this is a game that started Naughty Dog's more serious storytelling. And the characters here are so much more interesting than the brick walls in the first game. Torn, Ashlyn, and Sick, and everyone else are pretty great supporting characters. Jak has more of a personality this time, which makes his dynamic with Daxter all the more funnier. It's kind of a love triangle between Jak, Ashlyn, and Kira. Core's a pretty cool villain. Character interactions in this game are great to listen to, and the Dark Tones pull off really well too, but the game's not afraid to be its old playful self every now and then. And there's also so much more depth to the gameplay too. So this game is basically if Ratchet and Clank had a crossover with GTA. There's a bigger focus on missions in this game. You go into one area and then complete one challenge, and then go back to somewhere and talk to someone else and go do another mission. Driving in Haven City isn't really as bad as people make it out to be. I mean, it can be a little bit annoying, but that's pretty much it. Honestly, I kind of like this structure even more than the first game. But then it's time to talk about the biggest change to the gameplay: weapons. This game has a bigger focus on combat than the first game. Jak has 4 guns. I know in my review I said that the only gun you'll be using the most is the morph gun, but honestly, if you start using the scatter gun a lot more, then you should be pretty good. I learned this from PowerCell Zeke's video on Jak II, and if you haven't seen this video, I highly recommend you do it. It's a really good video. I'll leave a link in the description. Anyway, the guns in this game gives the combat more depth, since before it was just one punch and you're dead. Here you have to actually strategize what gun might be best for you, or see what gun deals the most damage, and just like in Daxter, the game makes you find out for yourself which gun to choose. I mean, this doesn't mean that there's no platforming in this game. It's still here, but it's just mixed with the more complex combat. Platforming is still one of the best parts of the game, since Jak controls basically the same as before. I also love how, unlike in Jak 3, the game does a pretty good job on keeping the combat and platforming the main focuses on the game. I like to divide this game up into 20% missions and the other 80% in platforming and shooting. The graphics are probably one of the best parts of the game too. I honestly would have confused Jak II for a PS3 game if I haven't played a single game in this series. That's how good this game looks. No other games can compare to Jak II at the time. So yeah, from how much I've been praising this game, you can see why I put this at number 1. Honestly, I can't think of anything about this game that's genuinely bad. Well, except for one thing, and yeah, we're going there. If you've seen any other review of Jak II on the internet, then you know exactly where this is going. Jak II can get pretty hard. Well, if you're a pussy. Alright, I'm not gonna act like I have never rated this game before, because I have. I mean, the difficulty isn't too bad in the first 2/3 of the game. There's an occasional spike in difficulty, but it isn't really that bad. You can beat it if you keep going at it. But then you get to the final third, Okay, I feel like Naughty Dog was listening to all the people, and by all the people I mean just me, saying that the first game was too easy. So to fix that, they decided to make this one the hardest fucking games I've ever played. And the final third, just goddamn. Almost every single mission in this final third is so painful. The final race with arrows is the worst of all of them. I thought it's impossible to complete a hard Mario mission without dying at least once. The stupid mech, which is the complete opposite of what a mech is supposed to do, and the fucking escort mission with Jinx and his gang through the sewers, who can't defend themselves for shit but have no problem pulling their gun out you whenever you accidentally hit them. And apparently Naughty Dog forgot what checkpoints are, so every time you die, you're put back to the start of the mission. And to top it all off, Jak only has 8 hit points, which, I mean, it doesn't really sound that bad. But some of these metalheads take a huge chunk of your health, which means that Jak only took up 2 hits from bigger enemies. And it's because of this difficulty spike at the final third that most people prefer Precursor Legacy or even Jak III over this game, which is fine, that's fair enough, but I don't think that it's enough to ruin how much fun I had with this game during the first 2 acts. And when you finish a really hard mission, you really feel like you accomplished something. Other than that, I have no problem saying that Jak II is my favorite game in the entire series. So now that's finally done. I've finally done everything I wanted to do with Jak and Daxter now. I don't know when I'm going to do a Let's Play on Jak II, maybe sometime this year, but I feel like I've talked about Jak and Daxter enough already. I'm not sure there's a lot of you wondering when I'm going to look at Sly Cooper, but don't worry, I'll go to those games soon. I just want to make sure that I'm really ready to tackle those games. But that being said, I want to know how you guys would rank the series. Let me know in the comments and tell me how wrong my list is. But anyway, for the next review, I'm going to be going after Crash Bandicoot. This is a video that I've been putting off for a while, but I'm finally going to do it. And before I end this video, I want to give a couple of shoutouts to some smaller channels, just to help their channel grow. I mean, being my videos won't really help your channel grow, but just want to contribute. So first shout out is going to be to Horror Kid. Actually makes the same content that I do, makes reviews and top 10s, and does some Let's Plays too. He's currently working on a Final Fantasy 13 retrospective, so yeah, go check him out. The shout out I want to give out is a young Croc Lord. He's actually doing Jak and Daxter marathon right now too, so go check those guys out. Links in the description. So yeah, anyway, with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.